Good evening. We'd like to welcome everyone to the continuation of our City of Hartford departmental budget hearings, and we would like to welcome our Chief Auditor here to Council Chambers to give us a presentation from the Internal Audit Department. And so we would like to welcome our Chief Auditor whenever, and you can proceed whenever you're ready. And I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that I'm joined by our Council President, Council President Glendon Thames, and my name is Councilman T.J. Clark, and welcome everyone in the audience and to our viewing audience as well for our budget presentation. So you may have a way, sir.
President John, here we are again a year later, and my budget hasn't changed that much. It went up contractually with my HPA auditors. As you know, I'm the Chief Auditor of the City of Hartford. I'm appointed by the Audit Commission. We'll just go through the slides real quick. Our areas of responsibility are basically, well, not basically, they are all city operations, including the school board, the parking authority, fire police, every operation in the city. We have a staff of 5. 3 are HPA employees, and I have a deputy. I'll get into the performance results later, and our budget, and our requested budget. Like I say, the area of responsibility of the City of Hartford, public schools, parking authority, library, stadium, the MRF, grants, and everything that comes from the state from a revenue standpoint. Like I said, we have 5 full-time employees. We are all certified public accountants except one of my staff, which is a certified internal auditor. Most of us have advanced degrees, master's degrees. We have no administrative support, and our office is directly upstairs. Every year I do an audit plan. We have identified over the years approximately 170 plus auditable areas. And they're all the different areas within all the operations. For example, if you take finance, the tax office is an auditable area. And then we break that down into 3 pieces: property, real estate, personal property, and automobile. Same thing on the assessor side. So all those different operations are identified as auditable areas, and we have about 170 of them. And we rank them high, medium, low, 1, 2, 3, based on the risk. In the past, we've done like cyclical audits, and the internal audit profession generally would put priority 1s on a 3-year cycle, priority 2s on a 5-year cycle, and priority 3s on a 7-year plus cycle based on risk. We have the staff now to do it in that type of manner, with given the coverage to all the areas based on their rankings. What a lot of companies are doing now, internal audit departments are doing now, is they have one thing called agile auditing, and a friend of mine is the chief auditor for State Farm, and he has about 70 auditors, and he split them up into 5 or 6 teams with different experiences on them, and they are doing continuous audits of operations within State Farm, continuously. Using robotics, all kinds of techniques with advanced technology. We don't have that luxury here to do that. We're doing a little of that. My position, and I changed it for this year and going forward, we're going to look at the high-risk areas. We're going to concentrate on them, whether we're in there every year based on change, based on the risk elevating or declining, and not sort of get away from the cyclical, but we will go into operations periodically to let them know we're here. We're also responsible for special investigations under the city municipal fraud policy. Employees are required to report to internal audit to me, suspected fraud within the city. We now have an issue with the school board and whether they're complying with that or not. They do not have their own fraud policy, which we've been trying to get into the school board for many years, and it's just been totally resisted. So we're still working with that. A lot of internal audit departments like to tout how much they save for the corporation or the entity. That's one measurement you can do, but that's really not the right measurement to do. And I've taken the position I don't want to tout any of all the savings except the $1 million this year for the healthcare audits that we brought to light in the city and the board. We recommend improvements to operations. We're not in there looking for every little thing that's wrong. We have a good sense and appreciation for the city's appetite for risk. We know that all the departments now are very thin, some understaffed. When that happens, you lose some internal controls. So we're very, very aware of that, and we consider that when we're doing our audits. You know, we're looking at what are the really key controls we really need for something not to go south. Whereas consultants, process improvement, our audit staff has over 100 years of experience in the business. Many of us have been here for many, many years. In fact, today is my 12th anniversary with the city. And I love my job. Also, what I've implemented this year, actually in middle of 2018, all our audit issues, findings in our audit reports, all the recommendations that we made require follow-up. It's been a very, very big issue with us over the years. And M&B was responsible for doing that, which is very unusual when I came here. But we didn't have this. If we dedicated the staff to do that, then we'd lose some audit coverage. So, long story short, we took that process over, and we're going through. We've had hundreds of recommendations that need to follow up. And we put a plan in. We'd only go back a couple of years, because if it wasn't fixed 5 years ago, it really doesn't matter. Or we're going to do a subsequent audit and we'll address it then. We're getting in very, very good shape now. And we'll report periodically on the status of that. Our key performance measures, it's up there. You see our budget basically flat over the years, except for required increases in the HPA union. We had a one dip in 18, and that's because we had an open position for over 7 months. That's why that one dipped. So we're basically totally flat. We have 20 planned audits with our staff and how we allocate our time based on all the risk. We do about 20 audits and probably about 10 special reviews a year, whether it be a fraud investigation or a special request from a council person or anybody else. This year we're going to exceed plan. We're at 18 or 19 we have done. We will go over the 20 this year. You may have a question of why, well, how come we're doing more audits? We've had a slowdown in special requests. Another thing that we do some continuous auditing, and there's one specific thing we do every year. We call it the death audit. And what we do is we run all the pensioners currently collecting against the Social Security death file. That exercise fleshes out people that are deceased, but are still getting paid their pension. And we do that every year. We're actually in the process now. As you're aware, the healthcare audits that we had a third party do, resulting in over $1 million in savings. Those two processes for the district and the city were done because of our recommendation in audit reports, 2 audit reports. It was done. We took it a step further, and we identified spouses that were divorced and kept on the plan. And we identified 17 or 18 at the school board and about 13 or 14 at the city. We had the claims run on them, and we had a couple of big ones. One was $700,000 in claims that should have never been paid. Another one was over $200,000, and another one was close to $190,000, and then going down. We referred all these to the police. They were taking them to the state attorney, and the state attorney put a threshold of $2,000 on it. And then we were just informed that they elevated that to $10,000. That resulted in from 20 people getting warrants issued down to 3 now. And those warrants for their arrest is going to be going out very shortly. And we're working with the Hartford PD on that. My point is, okay, we did this massive exercise. And going forward, how are we going to identify divorced spouses that are kept on the plan? So I didn't have any confidence or at the board level and even at the city level and HR for them to do that, considering their expertise and their staffing position. So we contacted the state Supreme Court. I forget the area is the Connecticut Judicial Branch. And we talked to the folks up there, and they maybe sign a form of confidentiality. And what they're going to do is they're going to give us all the divorce decrees in the state of Connecticut every quarter. I'm probably going to do this yearly, do it once a year. They sent me the divorce decrees on a spreadsheet for 2018, which we've already covered in that big audit, but they sent it to me anyhow. And there were 20,000 names on there, divided by 2, so there's 10,000 divorces in 2018 state of Connecticut. So when I run this for 2019, I expect the same, and we'll take those spouse dependents on our health care coverage for both the board and the city and run it against that divorce decrees. And that'll flesh out people that have not been taken off the plan when they should have been taken off. So we're going to do that continuously, just like we do the death audit. And then we'll run the claims on that and take the action that we have to do on anything that pops out of that exercise. There are just a couple of things that we're doing continuously. Just one more thing. I've changed the format of our audit reports. My predecessor liked to issue audit reports 10, 20, 30 pages, and I don't think a lot of people were reading 30 pages of audit reports at night. So what I've implemented is that the audit issue will be on 1 page. I won't sacrifice, I won't keep it brief if it's going to impact the thrust of the point. So not necessarily to one page or not. But what I've done is, on the left side of the first page, second page, the first issue, it'll be the issue. What is the issue? It'll be 2 or 3 sentences. If I need 10 to say it, we'll use 10. But we're going to keep it short, concise, to the point. So the reader will be able to read this and understand what we're talking about. Here's an issue we have. All right, so what? The second piece will be what caused the issue. And we will state the cause, how this happened. Then the third piece, right under that, will be the effect. Okay, we have an issue. We know what caused it. So what? Here's the effect. This is what can happen or did happen because of the issue. And the fourth and the next one will be our recommendation on how to rectify the situation or the issue. On the right side will be management's response, as always. But it'll be directly, their response will have to address the cause and the recommendation. It'll be right in there, and it'll be easy to read and understand. I also put in the front of the report that internal audit will follow up on the recommendations on the date or subsequent to the date that you agreed to implement it. So we're doing that also. There's some of the highlights. We've been busy. Just one more brief point. We issued a revenue audit a few months ago. They got a lot of attention by the mayor. The mayor wasn't real happy that he was surprised the audit report was issued, and that's when he found out about it. And I had conversations with Thea, and I said, look, the mayor or council doesn't need to read about a major issue with the city in an audit report in the Hartford Current. And it's up to the department heads, I told them, they have to keep you informed of a big issue coming down the pike. And I tell them to do that. Whether they do that or not, that's beside the point. I said, if we come up with a very big issue that's going to hit the media, I will let the mayor and the council know that this is coming and this is what's being done about it in advance, so you won't be blindsided by the Hartford Current or NBC 30 or any of the other media outlets. So we're going to be doing that. That's about it. Any questions?
Thank you, sir. Were you provided any questions in advance from the council?
I did not receive any questions in advance.
Okay, no problem. I'm quite sure that my colleagues do have a few questions for you. I just have a couple questions. How long does it take your team to perform an audit? And the time that it takes, does it depend on the size of the department or the request?
Yes. And what I've done this year, and we haven't done it in the past, but I implemented it in 2018, fiscal year 19 audit plan. I took the 20 audits and sat down with my staff and I said, okay, we got 20 audits, we got 5 of us. And you 4 are doing the audits, so that's 5 apiece. And we said, who should we assign with their expertise to the 20? So I assigned 5 audits to each auditor. And they're going to be responsible for doing those 5 audits. And then I took our available hours, taking out vacation, time off, all that. What are our available hours to do these 20 audits? And put estimates on them. Say, okay, we're going to do this audit in police, the private duty audit. In the past, we spent too much time on it. I'm going to give you 200 hours to do it, period. We put that on a spreadsheet, and we're tracking that. So it depends on the size of the audit, on how many hours I apply to it. A big audit should be no more than 300-400 hours. And that's from start to finish. Also, by doing this, the downtime is minimized because they can be thinking, and they are thinking about all of their 5 audits, one that I may be doing in 6 months. So you can start doing you can start gathering data, doing the prep, and getting a lot of things done on different audits throughout the year. So trying to maximize their productivity. That's one of the reasons why we're going to do more than 20 this year, because we tighten that up. But
Okay, thank you. We received email, I think it was last night, from a constituent who sent an email to the fraud department. With that email that came forth, does that mean that there's going to be an internal audit? Does that trigger an internal audit investigation on their request, or?
I don't. You got a request yesterday?
Well, we received.
What was the topic?
It was regarding retirees and double dipping.
From ex-officer Fago?
Yes.
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 Yeah, I dealt with ex-officer Fago 6 months ago about Chief Ravella and him collecting his pension and his salary and a new pension. And we resolved it. He did send that. He called me and he sent me that email. And I've been talking. I said, I'll address this. I'm addressing that right now with HR.
Okay.
So we pulled the ordinances that were put into effect, and the one went into effect in beginning of 2013. I think Ken Kennedy put that forward, and that ordinance was addressing the double dipping, and it was specifically written for when Sandy Key Borges was an issue about that. What's interesting about that ordinance that went into effect in January of 13, it had a clause put in there, this one section does not apply until January of 16. So there were grandfather people in there. And it was primarily grandfather and department heads in there. So under the current code, and here's a typical example, and I'm working with HR on this one, and he brought up our acting chief of police. And our acting chief of police retired, maxing out his pension in June of 18. He was rehired in August of 18 as assistant chief. So he's collecting his full pension of $113,000, and he's collecting a salary of $135,000. And the kicker here is he's also accruing a new pension. So it's double, triple dipping now. Under the ordinance, and the ordinance refers back to the group that this applies to, and the clause is, if you are rehired, if you retire and are rehired, your salary will be reduced by the amount of your pension, but not more than half of your salary. So in 30's case, we couldn't reduce his salary by $113,000 because it's more than half of his salary. If we had to do it, we would reduce it by $67,000. The kicker in here, it only applies, as far as I know, and the way the code reads and the way it refers to this section of the individuals that it applies to, is that they're only department heads.
Say that one more
So
time.
if you're assistant chief, you can collect your full salary, your full pension, and accrue a new pension in a
So only
full-time
apply-
in a full-time position.
So that the current ordinance, so you're saying the current ordinance that was written by, introduced by former Councilman Ken Kennedy, that this ordinance is only applicable to department heads.
When it comes to reducing their salary by the amount of their pension.
Gotcha.
Now, at the state level, the state has corrected this, and they have a state statute. If you are, say a state police officer, maxes out at 20 years, collects full pension, we hire you back, say a captain or a colonel or whatever. That's a bad example. Marilyn Aponte is a typical example. The state of Connecticut said, if we run your pension plan, you cannot go and work for another municipality in this state or the state and collect your pension from that municipality. So Marilyn was collecting her pension from New Britain and working full-time for the city of Hartford. The state came out and said, can't do that. They stopped her pension. And that's what the state did. The state does not run our pension, so it's not applicable to us.
Gotcha.
So
Okay.
the bottom line is anybody under a department head can retire, specifically fire and police, because they max out on their pension at 20 and in the future 25, 20 and out. They can be rehired a month later in another position and start all over again. And that's the way it is. You folks need to change that.
Thank you, sir. Open up to
Also, this issue is not unique to Connecticut or this municipality. This is an issue all over the country, at the state level, at the city level, and at the municipal level. State of Illinois, the governor got involved, and they're grappling with it now because it's rampant between fire, police, and teachers because they max out on their pensions at an early age.
Thank you. Council,
Right, so-
Council President?
Thank you. So just to piggyback there, I imagine there was a clear rationale and intention when they drafted that policy excluding everyone else above chief
Right.
because of the early retirements that occur within those specific fields.
That's right.
That they still have 20, 30 years left of working to come back as a superintendent, as a police chief, as a fire chief, or what
Right.
have you.
Generally-
So I think that's just, the policy ramifications and the tensions points when we
Right.
look to kind of revisit the policy, like how do you, remedy that? Because there is a clear talent pool out there that we will probably need to tap into for leadership positions.
Yeah.
But how do we make it so that it's not draining the financial situation of the municipality?
And the
And making it a fair, equitable compensation. So definitely understand that, and that's something that I think as council, we need to
Right.
really look at, and try to remedy that in the best way possible, that we're not hamstringing ourselves from a talent perspective.
That's right.
And recruitment, but something that is financially feasible and responsible for the city. So thank you for that. So just a couple of questions on another note. I just want to make sure, I'm sorry, I was having a hard time hearing you, so I apologize if you said this and I didn't hear it. But I want to make sure that I understood the audit response. So like you do your audit, you give your recommendations, which I appreciate. Thank you for sending that over to council because I do read through them.
They'll be
And
easier
then-
now.
Right, and then there's the follow-up. And so
Yes.
I'm trying to gauge what the overall response has been from the administration. So when you issue your audit, there's a series of recommendations. What does that process look like? And what's just a general response from the administration? Are they being responsive and taking those recommendations and doing what they need to do to correct the actions?
I'll answer that with just a brief history. Going back to Pedro, I think they were quarterly, they weren't monthly, the FinStat meetings, the financial statistical meetings that we had in the green room. And Leanne always threw up there in M&B all the audit findings and all what was outstanding. And it was always a big issue with the mayor. Why do we have 300 outstanding items that are over 3 years old? Why aren't they fixing them? And nobody had an answer for it. And my answer, my answer was to it, if you're in a corporation, and we had this at Cigna, and it was written into the bonus plan, and part of their bonus was how your division did, how you did personally, blah, blah, blah. But there's a section in there for internal audit for department heads and presidents and heads of divisions and subsidiaries around the world. If you did not do or what you agreed to when you were supposed to do it, that's going to have an impact on your bonus. We don't have that luxury here because there's no impact on their salary or bonuses. There's no hammer to lay down. I mean, the mayor and Luke is behind everybody following up and doing what they say they're going to do. But there was just a lax attitude, and I think over the years the reports are so voluminous, and you had to fish for, well, what would I do? And there was a lot of policies and procedures you never put into effect, and they would just give you lip service. Okay, we'll do it. They didn't even know what they were agreeing to. And that built up and built up and built up. And then when M&B was doing it, they didn't really have the expertise to ask the right questions and follow up. Does it make sense? Do you know what you're doing? So we've corrected all that now going forward.
So positive in general.
Oh, absolutely.
And responsive,
and
right?
we will have this all cleaned up real soon.
So another question, because again, I just always want to make sure I have this straight in my head, as far as just, the plan audits that you have every year and kind of the frequency and cycle of when you do departments and when you hit departments, because it may be like every other year or what have you. So like, for example, like tax collection and tax office,
Right.
like, do you do that audit every year? Like, no, I think the answer is no, but I just want to get a clear sense of like.
Well, it's yes and no.
Okay.
I covered this in the first few minutes of the presentation.
That's why I said I was having a hard time hearing you, so that's why
Oh,
I
okay.
said I apologize in advance.
Like I said, we rank them 1, 2s, and 3s, high, medium, low. And what we've done in the past is the number 1, the high-risk audits, we did on a 3-year cycle. On the number 2 risk audits, less riskier, we did it on a 5-year cycle. And 3s, we did it on a 7-year plus cycle, based on our available resources. If I had 5 more auditors, the cycles could be reduced. But generally, that's what internal audit departments work on, a 2, 5, 7 time frame. Also, internal audit departments are shifting, getting away from that, and they're concentrating on the big exposure risk areas. Say for an insurance company, claims. It's half your outlay. So they're constantly, every year, constantly auditing claims over and over and over and over. Right? When it comes to tax, we're in the tax office every year because we took tax and broke it up into 3 pieces: personal property, real estate, and cars, an automobile. So this year we did personal property. Last year we did personal property. Year before we did real estate. This year we did automobile, which is getting wrapped up now. And we did the same thing with the other side of it, the assessor's office, which is the same thing: real estate, personal property, automobile. They assess, put the value, taxes, and collects. So, and what we've done to really get a coordinated effort, we're doing the audits simultaneously. So we're in tax and assessors every year on a 3-year cycle.
Okay. So
It's $270 million worth of our revenue.
Right.
So it requires our attention. But we're doing automobile and tax and automobile in assessors at the same time, because you get issues going back, and we've had this before. Tax says, that's not my problem, it's the assessor's problem. The assessor says, it's not my problem, it's tax problem. So now we're doing both at the same time, and we resolve a lot of those flip-flopping issues.
So on the note of, the high risk, high exposure areas and really like prioritizing those on an annual basis. So we did the insurance dependent, and you said you
Yep.
took it a step further and did the spousal one, and, that's kind of top of mind because that revealed a lot.
Right.
I'm just curious to know, like, when was the audit, the last audit before that audit? Like, when did we do, a dependent care spousal audit prior to that?
That whole eligibility audit, we do audits in HR in the city and in talent management and the superintendent. Every 3 years we're in there doing different pieces of it. Last year I audited in early 2018, I issued 2 audit reports, one for talent management and one for the city HR. In that audit report, I recommended, because I found out through all my contacts and everything I'm doing in the industry, that many companies around the country, major corporations, are hiring third parties to do the eligibility audit. In other words, require all the documentation to prove that your dependent is eligible. For me to do that would take an enormous amount of time. So we hired a third party. The school board hired a third party, and we recommended they get a third party to do it. And we hired this company, Sakova, out of California, which did an excellent job. And it only cost like $45,000. So they did that. And then I recommended to HR here, use Sakova. We used them at the board, and they did it for us. So they actually did the audit and came up with all these people that didn't comply. They didn't give birth certificates for the kids, or they didn't give a marriage certificate. They wouldn't comply or voluntarily drop dependents. And as a result, hundreds of dependents were dropped from our plans. And Sakova threw a savings of $400,000 to $500,000 a year in claims that we'll never pay on these people because they should have never been there anyhow.
Right.
They identified all of them.
Yep.
We took it a step further and
Yes.
said, okay, why would somebody not comply unless the person wasn't eligible? When it comes to children, we really couldn't do much with children because we need the parents' consent and cooperation. If they're not going to cooperate with HR or a third party, they're not going to cooperate with me. But on divorces, we have access to state records. And we found out that we went and looked at all the spouses that were dropped voluntarily or involuntarily and checked if they were divorced. And we found over 30 of them. And one of them divorced her husband in 2002, never took him off the plan. And we incurred $730,000 in claims.
So I guess that's kind of
Right.
the underlying question, right? Because she from 2002, so
Right.
we didn't catch that in all that period of time, I guess, right? Like from an audited perspective, because we didn't really audit it, or we didn't.
We've done
catch it?
eligibility audits, but we looked at the claim, we looked at their files, and all the documents are in there originally. Every employee in the city and at the board is required, and by state statute, to report to your employer and or your healthcare carrier that you are divorced. In the state of Connecticut, I think you have 60 days, 30 or 60 days grace to tell them. We have folks on there that didn't do that. I have a retired fireman right now living in South Carolina, kept his ex-wife on the plan and ran up over $200,000 in claims.
So is the plan or is the recommendation to have SACOR do an annual engagement, or it's not, or annual is not necessary? Is it like biannually, every 3 years? I'm just trying to get
to do something like that and put the burden on all our employees to do this every year wouldn't really be practical or fair. Every 5 years, maybe, a full-blown one like that. One more minute, Larry. But to control that, say, okay, are we going to be exposed for 5 years? No, we're not. Because I went to the state courts and I'm getting a download of all the divorce decrees for the state of Connecticut. And we're going to run that against our spouse dependents every year. And that's going to kick out somebody that's on a plan that was divorced 6 months ago. Then I'm going to run the claims on them from Cigna and or Anthem and see what the impact is.
All right, thank you. I just have one last question, but you don't need to answer it. You can just email me. But if there's any policy recommendations that will help you do your job more effectively or that you think council consider, can you please just email me? Thank you.
Okay. Larry.
Councilman Deutsch.
Councilman Joyce.
Thank you. Just pursuing this question for one moment before I go on to something else. If an individual or family was for some reason reluctant to relate to Secova, our contractor, can we provide them any alternative or more local means to state a case, to show the documents or some? Because as you know, that has been an issue for some.
Right.
And the second part of the question is the contract, of course, we know is with the Hartford Public Schools. And there's question raised as to whether we can find and read a contract with the city of Hartford, a different entity.
The contract with Secova?
Right.
Rich Pekorski has that.
Well, I haven't been able to see it, even though I've asked for it. And a separate and distinct contract between Secova and the city of Hartford, which might have some city council oversight, I assume. So that hasn't been located. I just mentioned that, and we're still looking.
He definitely has that.
Well, good.
I may also have it. Check with me. I may also have that in our work papers.
Okay, fine. But now the more significant question is the first one I raised about a local discussion, let's say, where documents are lacking.
Right. The first part, a lot of employees did resist going to Secova and wouldn't give them the information. A lot of them, and then when Secova issued their final report and the city and the board dropped these people and their dependents from coverage, now that drove it home to them. Said, oh, man, my children and my spouse, they're not covered because I didn't supply this information. And we were very open to it, especially at the city when it came to the cutoff date of like October 1st. Then we moved it to November, and we gave the people a lot more time to actually come in here and give the information to Rich. So if you had somebody, I'm not sending my marriage certificate out to California to this company. We gave them the opportunity to personally bring it in, and then we reinstated people. And some people didn't do it. So Rich dealt with a lot of people like that. We bent over backwards to really get their information from them at their convenience. And some just totally refused. Some gave Rich Pekorski in benefits management here a very, very, very hard time. Especially that ex-fireman that's down in South Carolina. Gave him a very, very hard time.
Just to follow through, did the audit include documentation of the notification or the letters sent out as required that health insurance had been suspended?
Yep.
And the audit showed that was done?
That came from us. Secova didn't do any of that. All they did was identify the people. They did nothing with removing them from the plan. That was all done by HR and over in the board, talent management. They're the ones I informed through letters and emails, letters, to our employees that your dependent will be dropped on this date.
Okay. On a somewhat different subject, would it be a quick and easy SQL search or something like that to track month to month the number of health insurance claims and to divide it, let's say, by category, either surgical or elective or non-elective, and also whether and for how long the individual had been on the high deductible HSA plan as differentiated from the traditional insurance, whether it be Cigna or any other carrier, but to just have a breakdown month to month and what the plan was over the last, let's say, 5 years,
Right.
just from claims data.
Through this whole exercise, between the two companies, Cigna was by far the best with giving us accurate, timely information on claims. Anthem wasn't so responsive. There's no doubt about it that Cigna can give us that information. All we have to do is ask them. We're their clients, and they will definitely do that. No ifs, ands, or buts. Anthem will probably do it too. You just have to tell them what you want, what analysis you want. They will give it to you. They'll give it to Rich.
But would there be data comparative between the HDHP plans
Right.
and the traditional insurance?
Right, I know where you're going. I know exactly where you're going with this. And Cigna can provide that. Since you've gone to this plan, claims have decreased, they've increased, but there's a lot of different factors in looking at the claims. And you know, when I was in the insurance business for over 25 years, you know, we always looked at severity or frequency or severity. What is it? And so when we switch over, you could have a spike in the claim number, but you really got to get down into the weeds. Was it severity, severe? You know, it was cancer, whatever, big cases. Or is it frequency? People are using it more. You know, so what we're being told is that from HR that if we go on the HSA, claims are going to go down. Well, that's not necessarily true, and I should audit this. What information do you have to make that kind of statement? Where are you getting this from?
Who, I?
No, I would say to HR,
yes.
Where are you getting this from?
Exactly
Show me. Show me the complete actuarial analysis coming from Cigna Corporation on this plan versus this plan, taking into consideration frequency, severity, changes in the plan coverages, changes in the membership, changes in ages, who's dropping off. I mean, there's so many different factors. And those folks over there know what they're doing. They'll be able to give us that information. And I'll guarantee, I shouldn't say this, but I don't think either HR department has that kind of information.
So do I take it here, concluding?
But we should have that information before we make a major decision like that. There's no ifs, ands, or buts.
No kidding. Yeah, of course.
Right.
And so it will be easy for us just to tally up the claims over time, even month to month, under one plan or the other. But could you also do a distribution that would analyze postponement of care between diagnosis and intervention, which is the contention?
That's right.
And it comes out frequently in the media lately.
Right.
The postponed care with the increased severity consequent to that. So
That's right.
not to belabor it, but I wonder our information system or Cigna's could do that kind of breakdown analysis about the health impacts, let alone the monetary cost.
Well, the folks at Cigna and the folks at Anthem and all the big healthcare companies have big groups that do that kind of stuff. And they do that when they go and price a product. So when they price a PPO product, and I did a lot of audits of the pricing of our products at Cigna, when I ran the audit department at Cigna in Bloomfield, we did those audits of the pricing module. How do you price these things? What data are we using to price our products? You know, is it good, valid data? Just like what you're talking about. So how do we come up with a price for a high deductible plan? Well, there's a lot of different factors that go into that pricing. That's all the details and the exercise that they have to go through to show our two different products. And then you're going to have assumptions in there. So you're going to have some time for it to develop, a year, 2 years, whatever it is, and then really say. What's going to happen is if we go to the HSA plan, which I think we are, and fire, I think, already went to it, they did, nobody down in HR is going to monitor whether this is a good deal or not and get all that information. Okay. What I could say to you, Larry, send me a request to do an audit of it.
Fine idea. Fine idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman. We have no other questions.
Yep.
Thank you, sir, for your presentation. You're always well informed and keep us well informed as well as to what's going on. So I'm looking forward to working with you for the rest of rest of the year. So thank you very much for your work.
Thank you for having me, and I love my job.
All right. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Next up is Sharice Snipes from the MHIS.
Wow, went a little over. You're going to have to go down to that. We're having to go down to that.
Different, or just the same one you said this? The same one. Okay, we have that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So first, let's say, not congratulations, just acknowledgements, and then the next slide. Okay. Good evening, Councilman and Councilwoman. Thank you for allowing me to present the MHIS budget presentation for fiscal year 2020. First, I would like to acknowledge MHIS staff over on my left who's here to show their support. These ladies and gentlemen work day and day to make sure the city and the school's technology needs are met. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. The mission for MHIS. The mission of Metro Hartford Innovation Services is to provide secure, proven, innovative technologies that enhance operational efficiencies while providing convenient access to government and educational information systems for the City of Hartford, the Hartford Public Schools, the Hartford Public Library, and the Hartford Parking Authority. MHIS currently has 33 full-time staff, 14 are city staff, 19 are Board of Education staff, 7 are female, 22 are male. We have 3 vacant positions open, 2 on the city side, 1 on the Hartford Public School side. 6 of our staff are Hartford residents, and we have 7 that's bilingual. For fiscal year 2019, these are our highlights. We completed phase 1 of the upgrade of the city's hartford.gov infrastructure to ensure resources are secure and protected. We completed phase 1 of implementation of software-defined access to accelerate the journey to a digital-ready network for the city and schools. We transitioned to a more efficient infrastructure to utilize cloud services. We upgraded the PinLink system used by the police department for communication surveillance, data collection, and analysis. We secured $1 million in federal E-rate funding for Hartford Public Schools to upgrade the network infrastructure. We purchased cybersecurity insurance. We provided all city staff with security awareness training. We're partnering with operating departments to explore the purchase of a software platform that will allow departments to share data, city service requests, which increase the efficiencies. Partnering with the COO to explore the redesign of the much-needed design of the city's website. We recently issued a RFP for a cybersecurity assessment. The city has never had a cybersecurity assessment performed ever that provides a comprehensive overview of our environment. The security assessment will help us prioritize where we should focus resources to protect, detect, and react to security threats against the city and schools. Our strategic initiatives are to redefine the shared services model in service delivery by creating a strategy for IT modernization, which could provide lower costs for technology, greater availability, more efficiency, and improved compliance and security. We are currently managing both a legacy infrastructure with updated systems. This has created a burden on the team due to the increase of security threats hitting the landscape by the minute and second. Protecting sensitive data is one of our main requirements. Another strategic initiative that we're working on is to enhance the user experience to improve the ease of use of technology. We also would like to improve IT systems district-wide for the schools to support the district model of excellence. Our budget comparison for fiscal year 2019 and fiscal year 2020. Our budget in 2019 was $3,174,113. For fiscal 2020, our recommended budget is $3,193,214, an increase of $19,101 due to staff yearly step increments. We had some cost savings. We reduced and/or eliminated 100 plain old telephone service lines from the Hartford Public Schools, resulting in a cost savings of approximately $20,000. We expanded the city-owned fiber network to support expansion of the police camera system, providing additional bandwidth. We partnered with Cisco, one of our vendors, to fully fund access to network engineers to assist with IT security projects, resulting in no cost to the city. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you for allowing me to present to you guys tonight, and I'll be more than happy to answer any questions.
Well, thank you for that. Do you have any prepared questions?
I do not.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation. One of the questions I do have for you is, has there been exploration yet regarding offering broadband services to residents in Hartford?
There was one years ago for Frontier, but that project got dropped. That's more of an economic development thing that we will work in conjunction with. So as far as I know right now, there's nothing planned for that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And I know that the Board of Ed uses Chromebooks.
Yes.
Is that going to be transitioned over to the city side?
Actually, the HR department has about 15 Chromebooks, so there's a start of it trickling over.
So we all would transition to Chromebooks sooner or later, or no?
No.
Okay. No.
They're not secure enough, so, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Councilman Sanchez?
Evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for your presentation. On page 4 of your presentation, upgraded the pending system used by PD for communications. I'm curious, do you work in conjunction with the ES&T?
Yes, to some extent. Yes, so they're looking for a new radio system. We're partnering with them to help them get that fully implemented and to create some type of disaster recovery because that's not present right now for them.
All right, so then, since you're working with them, have you already met with the state representative to work to transitioning over or migrating over to the state network?
No.
No?
No.
And then, what is cybersecurity insurance?
Cybersecurity insurance
What does that
protects the
cover?
city in the event of a security breach, which means if accounts are compromised and personal identifiable information is leaked out through that compromise, then we have insurance to help remediate things.
So as far as help remediate things, do they pay a victim? Do they reach out to the three credit bureaus to pay for the cost of sharing some services for the victims for security?
That's all inside the policy. I can send you a copy of it so you can see in detail everything that's protected.
Okay, if you can send that to everyone. in
Yep, I'll
council.
send it to everyone. They also include in that policy where we can contact them in the event of a breach. That's
Okay.
also included.
And then now on page 5, where it says recently issued an RFP for cybersecurity assessment. I thought that HPD has already done that in conjunction with MHRIS.
The assessment that we're going to have conducted is the vendor will come in with a eyes wide shut approach. The assessment that the PD did, that was more of a Q&A. That was questions asked and answers provided, but there wasn't any internal and external scans of our environment to show vulnerabilities. So what we want to do is we want to have an understanding of what we're dealing with, because right now we don't.
Okay. And then going back to the communication surveillance and the and working with ES&T, have you or ES&T or combined have HPD and HFD at the table?
Yes, they were part of the, yep.
Okay,
Yes.
at every meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Every meeting that I attended, they were there.
Okay, so
Yep.
if you can, please send me a schedule of the following meetings and
Okay.
minutes from the past
Yep.
meetings, please.
Okay.
Appreciate it,
Yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Bermudez.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
You're
Can you
welcome.
please describe the PenLink system used by the police department?
The PenLink system is a communications data analysis system. So what they do is it collects data from different calls that come in, and then you're allowed to get analysis on different, I guess, pivot points. You're welcome.
Council President.
Yes, thank you for your presentation. Good to
You're
see
welcome.
everybody. I guess, I don't know if you'll be able to answer this or if this is a question for Jolita, but I'm just want to make sure I'm following and can understand. Because on the line item budget that we have, it just has like a transfer out of your budget of the 3.193 million. So I'm trying to understand like the line item budget for network operations, business systems, administration, support services. That's not reflected in the line item budget. And I don't know if you have this version. That's why I said Jolita or someone for OMB may be able to answer this better, because I know some of your funds are dispersed in like sundry and other places. So I just want to make sure, though, based on the chart on 6-1, what is the breakdown of those expenses from a line item perspective? Can somebody help me out there?
So, I think I can help a little bit with that. So the breakdown for the budget, that's what you're looking for, right?
Yes.
Okay, so we have 4 different areas that our budget consists of. We have administration services, which is the CIO is under it, the principal analyst is under it, that's salaries, and there's some general office supplies with that. Then we have the business systems, which consist of employees, and then we have maintenance software agreements up under that as well.
And then you have Support service, based on this pie chart in 6-1.
Yep.
Support services, that's 673,000 thereabout, and then network operations,
Yep.
891,000. So just want to know what the breakdown is. And you don't have to go over that
Yep.
detail right now, but if somebody could just, as a follow-up,
Yeah.
provide all the council members with that breakdown
Yep.
of those different buckets represented
Yeah.
on the pie chart.
I
That
could
would-
actually send you a spreadsheet where we have the breakdown and what each
Great.
cost is.
Thank
And then
you.
and then it also includes what the city has and what they're paying their portion.
Versus what the Board of
Correct.
Ed is, great.
Correct.
That's
Yep.
what I need to see.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep, I'll email that over.
So I have a question. So is the, piggybacking off of Council President's question, the 3.9 million, that encompasses just the city side or?
Just the city.
Just the city side?
Yep.
Okay.
The board recommended budget this year is $3,063,111.
Okay. So you have about a $7 million overall budget?
Yes.
Give or take?
Yeah.
All right. Do you support help to support the ShotSpotter infrastructure for HPD?
Yes.
You do?
Yes.
What analysis do you run for them?
We basically look at it at an enterprise level where we look from the email perspective when it comes in to make sure that the officers are receiving those emails, because that's how they get notified, because the clip comes in email and it plays.
Right.
So we ensure that it's not getting tied up in spam filter or being blocked, or that's the extent that we do, because it's a web-based, I believe it's web-based. It's a cloud-based solution.
What about the C4 unit regarding the video surveillance? All the IT infrastructure is run through MHIS?
Yes.
And the notifications from ES&T will group me when there's either a homicide or a severe fire. You support that as well?
We support the infrastructure that all of that sits on.
Okay, wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you. Councilman Deutsch?
Thank you. Can you say a little bit more about services extending into the community which are now underserved? We mentioned the frontier, and I wonder whether we ever got to the stage of contracting or giving tax incentives and so on to frontier, and how that came to pass or not pass, especially as a model if we look in the future of services to neighborhood locations. Some of the libraries were closed, but there were promises of extension of computer access to school children, parents looking for work, and so on, in local sites other than across the street. How are we coming in all that with?
Ms. Nice, before you answer that question, I believe she answered that question when I asked her, which is more of an economic development question under development services versus MHIS. That's the next department.
I understand that, but I wonder if you could just say a few words going that way.
But Councilman,
Excuse me.
no.
My question.
But still, why ask her a question if it's something that is going to be for another department? We have to be respectful of that.
Because, Mr. Co-Chairman, this is an expert in exactly that field, and is familiar with the question at hand, more so perhaps than those in economic development.
But
So
I
I'd like
cannot
to-
concur with you,
I'd like to give
Councilman.
her the
Don't
chance.
answer that question.
Excuse me, I'd like to give her the chance to say a few words about that. Pardon me. In the Congress of the United States, does the chair cut off a legitimate question of
This is-
someone who appears before it?
This is the Court of Common Council, not Congress.
The question will stand, and we'd be interested in your perspective on how to serve communities through libraries or other isolated sites, notwithstanding the interference with that question.
I'm kind of between a hard place and a rock. One thing I will say is, and I think we're still doing it. So the city owns, or they're going to own the light poles. So there was infrastructure going up on the light poles for cameras. So while that's happening, we're having them, or we ask for them to possibly wire those poles for future connectivity if the city ever decided to explore Wi-Fi. So that's something that we're,
Thank you so much.
you're welcome.
Councilwoman Fox.
Hi, y'all. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I just have a question around process and staff, and it's not so much a really specific question, but you mentioned that you have 3 vacancies, and I'm curious, 1, what those vacancies are, and 2, how do the vacancies impact just your overall process in meeting the needs of the city and the Board of Education? Because it sounds like you have a pretty large load, and you know, this is my first time going through this, my first time looking at these organizational charts, but how does that impact your process day to day?
So to give you a little bit of history on this, so we support about, I want to say, a little over 20,000 devices citywide, including the city and schools. We have 6 field technicians, 3 help desks, support staff, 5 networking staff, 2 cybersecurity staff. Jonathan is one of them. And we have a business services division with about 5 people. The position on the school side is geared towards a technology specialist who can help with some of the day-to-day when needed, but then to focus on IT projects that helps with the ability to do large-scale deployments from a desktop level versus people having to be there. So that will allow us to do more self-service and provide self-service. On the city side, we're looking to have another security person who can look at the auditing side of security and kind of go around to each department and come up with a plan where we can help them develop a cyber plan to protect their assets and data. The third one would be, this one is going to be a technology assistant who would help with training, who will also work 50% with fire and police on their research on technology for their divisions.
Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
I just asked that question because, you know, whenever there's a tech problem, it's like email MHIS, and then
Yes.
you kind of forget that there are people on the other end of that
Yeah.
email and like a
Yeah.
whole operating department, and so it's just nice to hear how my emails impact your
Yeah.
day to day.
Yeah.
So thank you.
You're welcome. And we'll have your Surface tablet soon.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilman Sanchez.
Yes, one last question. So, the city fiber network is, well, a couple of quick questions to that one.
Okay.
Is buried, right?
It's
the
buried.
the city's fiber network for internet is buried, correct? Underground?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, yes.
All right. So then the idea is to use these utility poles to bring or to wire the system through the hollow part of the pole so that we can put repeaters so that we can finally offer free internet for
If
our...
the city decides to, yes,
Okay.
move forward. We're building the infrastructure, so later on, whenever it needs to be done, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then now who's charged with the maintenance? Of the-
That would be of the fiber.
Yes, of the fiber system. the
We
network.
use Frontier and White Castle? Surtex.
What's that?
Surtex and Frontier,
Surtex.
yes,
And we pay them on the contract, right?
yes,
Okay, so,
yes.
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, thank you. Seeing we have no other questions, thank you very much for your presentation. Have a good night.
Thank you guys for
And
listening.
thank you for your work to help us keep us safe. All right, we will break while we will gather together, and we will welcome Development Services coming up next.
So, what's the deal with the page? What do you guys do about that?
What's that? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. Did I give you my short executive, sir?
They might want me to go.
No, I might want, if I have to go through.
Okay, we will reconvene and get the second part of our budget hearing. So next up, we will have Mr. Johnson from Development Services, and then after that, we'll have parking, the Hartford Parking Authority. So without further ado, you have the floor to do your presentation. I'm not sure if you had any advanced questions, but if you did, after you finish your presentation, you can go right into them. If you didn't, I will open up the floor for Q&A amongst my colleagues. So again, thank you for being here. I see you have your full team, a lot of my buddies in the house, so hi to all of you. Thank you for being here as well. And so now you have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Council. Thank you, Council President, and thank you for happy to be here. To my right is Elda Sanani, who is the Deputy Director for Development Services. So I can approach this two ways since people, I'm going to say this is dealer's choice. I've submitted around I guess you can call it an executive summary of our presentation, which kind of goes through highlights and goes really quickly through the budget. I can go through that and go directly to some of the pre-submitted questions, or I could go through the entire slide deck. How would you like to proceed?
I think we have the long deck, so you can do your shorter executive summary deck.
Thank you. So, the first page is just kind of reflects the new organizational structure that we've established for development services, with obviously myself as the director, the deputy director, Alda Sanani, and then 5 division directors. One is the director of Blight Remediation and Housing Code Enforcement, that is Laura Sotomayor. Our new director of planning, who is Amy Chambers, who's actually doing a historic commission meeting tonight, so she might be here later. Our new director of economic development, which is Aaron Howard. Brian Matthews, our director of housing, and Don Chapman is our director of community and small business development. So I just wanted to show this slide to reflect kind of the new organizational chart that we've established, and then kind of who sits in what chairs. And then really quickly from as a development of activities, which is not in your slide deck but within your package, just want to say kind of some quick highlights. Through April 30th of this year, we've generated $5.3 million in new general fund revenues. During that same period of time, we've seen increased revenues from building fees and inspections by 19%. We've completed over 10,000 inspections across all of our inspection platforms. We've issued almost 1,100 notices of violations to buildings, blighted properties through housing code enforcement actions. We've completed over almost 3,700 plan reviews for new developments or renovations that are proposed within the city. We've identified and started enforcement actions of over 100 new blighted properties. We've made contact and provided services to over 600 businesses. We've assisted in the administration of over 200 special events. We've leveraged $1.2 million in non-city funding, so that's through our federal partners, to generate over $15 million in investments, which has created 107 new apartments, 107 new units, 69% which are affordable, and then a portion of those are home ownership. In October of 2008, when I started, the division had 35% of the positions were vacant. By next month, we'll see that staff vacancy down to 7%. And we've hired new directors for economic development and planning, and restructured the department without adversely impacting our approved budget. And obviously, you've hired me as the development services director in October of 2018. If you go really to, I guess it's page 15 on the deck, just so when people can see. If you look at our budget comparison from fiscal year 19 to fiscal year 20, this is generally speaking a static budget. The negative variance that you see for general fund represents the 2 housing code inspectors that we elected not to fill and kind of gave back to the budget. As some of you remember, there was talk about doing a residential licensing program. When I started, having run a residential licensing program in New Haven, we determined that given the staffing required that was necessary and the lack of systems that you need to actually enforce that program, that we not bring those people on for that purpose because we could not demonstrate to council that would be a break-even cost at any time soon. So we're continuing to reevaluate our way to do something like a residential license program, but the negative variance represents not taking those two positions on and then obviously bringing them back to the general fund. You'll notice that in the other grant section, we did something a little different that's in your budget book. We broke out the Section 8 from other grants. That's just because when you see $51 million in other grants, that's not a true representation of what our budget actually reflects. We have a $41 million Section 8 program that we administer through Imagineers, so I just wanted to differentiate what were capital dollars and other grants that pass through the department as opposed to our federal Section 8 dollars. And then if you notice from the position standpoint, we're actually less than what was adopted for fiscal year 19, and that reduction in two positions reflects the two positions that that I mentioned earlier for housing code inspectors that we're not putting in the budget this year. Moving forward to, I guess this would be page 17 of the presentation, where our areas of increased focus are for 2020. A lot of these align, or all of these align with the mayor's priority, which is number one, increasing our efforts around quality of life, with continued and renewed efforts on making our housing code enforcement platforms better and more efficient. Two, continuing our efforts around neighborhood development, whether it's event space and facilities like Dillon Stadium or making investments in Albany Avenue, in Parkville, or other parts of the north end of Hartford, as well as opportunity zone investments. We remain focused on making sure that development just doesn't happen in downtown Hartford, but we actually see development activities taking place within our neighborhoods because they're the core for the essence of the city. Third is a renewed commitment to customer service. I think part of that was a reflection of staffing. Some of the comments that I've gotten from the general public and also from some of you is how we had some gaps in customer service, particularly as people went through our experience either through building or planning. Again, some of that will be addressed through new staffing. Others will be addressed through new training efforts that we're trying to bring on board within the team, and also adopting service level agreements around things like 311 and inspection time frame, which we're hoping to bring better in line. And then lastly, and this is kind of a new initiative, one that we think is important, is around workforce development. In my limited tenure, I know there's been a lot of emphasis on quality of life issues. There's been a lot of emphasis on trying to facilitate more development downtown and in neighborhoods. But sometimes I found that the conversation about how do we make sure that our residents get jobs and have access to career ladders has not been as loud as I think our community dictates. So as we move forward for next year, one of the things that we're going to try and find a lot of time thinking about and making recommendations around is how do we have a better, more cohesive workforce development policy coming from the city, and then better working in partnership with our partners at the local, state, and regional level. And that is my very quick presentation. There were a couple of questions that we received by email through Jolita, and I want to try and address some of those. Kind of I want to work in reverse order and start with Councilmember Bermudez, who asked me the question about mobility and bikes and how and why our bike program or the programs that we've been adopting recently did not align with the transit work group. That's really, and as I responded, that's really a timing issue. So as my understanding is, the transit work group and some things started meeting in late 2017, 2018. By that time, we had already submitted a grant application to the state that was funded. And I believe it was through OPM, and typically OPM does not let you change what you submit for once it's been awarded. We acknowledge, and I know one of the mayor's priorities is to try and improve and increase resources that are allocated to mobility and increasing bike lanes. That is something that, is recommended but was not completely part of this budget. And I think that as we go forward, we're going to try and have resources, try to identify resources to fill that gap. There was a series of questions around what are the plans for providing property maintenance trainings and/or certification for our current housing code inspectors. So first, we do try and provide some training opportunities for our housing code inspectors. They're required to meet some certifications, admittedly not the same levels of certifications for our building officials, and the form for that is Casio. That is the trade group that provides training to housing code inspectors nationally and statewide. We also have put in, I think, a $40,000 request in our budget this year for training activities that will go to support Casio and other customized training that we think is necessary for our team. Secondly, there was a question about emergency repairs. Do we have a plan in place to make repairs like in past to avoid long-term relocations? I would say yes, we have a plan. I said to the extent that that plan is resourced the way that we would like, the answer is probably no. The intent is to try and, as we've done in past years, make available some CDBG dollars to provide, basically a lot of times that's fuel assistance, oil, some other things, so that we can keep people in their homes as opposed to in hotels. And then we've also changed and improved our relocation policy, which we anticipate we will be presenting to legal aid in the next 30 days or so. So that's going to happen. What type of education outreach do you currently provide for residents, stakeholders in the community? I would say the amount of things that we do is limited to our housing programs right now and fair housing. So through Brian's shop, we talk about our HPLF program. We also do seminars around fair housing, how to be a homeowner. But in terms of general community engagement, unless it's on a topic, we have not. I think going forward in the next year, we do plan on having a series of community conversations around workforce, marijuana, economic development, housing, gentrification issues. But I'm not sure. Those would be information sessions. I wouldn't necessarily say that we have a formal education or outreach program that's tied to any of our particular activities now. Development Services has a shortage in number and variety of inspectors. In an effort to not delay the process with City Services, or all the inspectors working together or cross-trained to assure that city codes are in compliance by performing joint inspections. No. I said, so one, I think we have to put inspectors in two groups. There are building officials who do building and then also permit review, and then we have the housing code inspectors, and then tied to the housing code inspectors that we have the blight team. I think for some reason, some are union issues, some are structure issues. They do not all do the same inspections, but I would say increasingly their approach to addressing conditions are coordinated. So while duties may not always overlap, they are increasingly coordinated, and that's partially due to the work that Laura and Elda are doing with the teams in their new roles. How many inspections does Development Services have? We have 18 in total positions, but I would acknowledge that in 5 in housing code, 3 in blight, 8 in building, but out of the 8, we have 2 vacancies that we're actively looking to fill, which will probably go to 3 to 4 in the next year as people take retirement. And in zoning, we have 2 with 1 vacancy, which is a reflection of the new efforts that we've made to actually do zoning enforcement. And that one that we have is still playing a hybrid role between zoning enforcement and planning while we continue to staff up. I would say there's probably need. There is a need, particularly for additional building and housing code inspectors. And at some point, we'll probably either come to the mayor or to the commission or to the council to try and repurpose the 2 positions that we didn't fill to try and fill that gap. How many directors, managers are there in development services? As I pointed out, there are 6 directors, a deputy, and myself. Development Services just went through a restructure in February. How many people received promotions? So I don't want to, I'm going to answer this question in 2 parts, right? So as a result of the restructure, 2 people received promotions. Elda was promoted to Development Services, Deputy of Development Services, and Laura was promoted from Blight Director to Director of L&I. As a result of restructure, since I've started, there have been other individuals on the team that have gotten promotions, partially, both of which were in the, there have been all of which were in the planning department, which was a reflection of the fact that they had been doing work above their position in advance of me getting there. So, so I take that. So Sandy Fry was promoted. Fred Peck was promoted, and I take that back. I call her Cece, but Selena was promoted in Brian Shop and Housing to a senior project manager. I think that's the title. To a project manager, and then Nick D'Angelo was promoted from a building official to a chief building official or building supervisor. So those were the promotions that have happened. I also want to acknowledge that we also have brought on new people, which isn't a promotion, but we just had additions to the team, which include a lot of people. So we've hired 11 people. Right. So, but I think implied in the question was the amount of diversity that we were bringing on the team and what level of diversity was there. So out of the total people that we've hired, which is 11, 5 have been African American, 5 have been Caucasian, 1 has been Hispanic. And of our total full-time employees, we have 13 Hispanic employees, 20 Caucasian, and 21 African American, which is 24, 37, and 39% respectively. And I would say that we have made an effort, 1, to make sure that we have talented, competent people doing the work that we need for the city of Hartford, and to the extent where talent and competence met the opportunity to hire a person of color or to hire people who are already members of the team, we've tried to do so. And then lastly, it says that Development Services has a history of not promoting or laying off people of color. How many people were promoted were people of color? If not, why? Who's making these decisions? I think that I just answered that question, and I would say the person who's making the decision ultimately is me in coordination with my team and HR. There is a question about community programs, and I can go through some of the community programs that the Housing Department offers, but I actually want a clarification as what you were defining as a community program. Again, in order to give a thoughtful but not a cute answer. But ones that we do offer is through House Hartford, we offer a down payment assistance program. We have the HPLF, which is a housing preservation loan fund that we do, and then we have a new program called Sustainable Solutions, which is a rehab program specifically targeted for homes in the Promise Zone neighborhoods. Then there was a question, do we have an updated list of small businesses in Hartford? I think we have a list of businesses that we've supported in Hartford, and then there's also a mapping tool that we created that shows businesses by neighborhood that we will forward a link to council so that they can access. I think that's all the questions that I got. I hope I answered them all to your satisfaction. If not, I am willing and able to take questions.
Thank you. I will kick us off because I do have a couple questions, and then I'll hand it over to my colleagues for any additional questions. So, again, this may be a question for you or Jolita, and you don't necessarily need to answer it right now. If you do know it, great. If you don't, you can follow up. Because I wanted to know, what are we projected to end the fiscal year with respect to license and permit? So we adopted a budget of 5.6. We are recommending for fiscal year 2020, 6 million. So I'm just trying to understand, like, where are we currently at, given there's a month and a half towards the end of the fiscal year. So if somebody can provide me.
So we can answer that.
Sure.
We believe that we'll hit about $6.2 million in total revenues this year.
6.2?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I think that's slightly above budget.
Great. The next question is, in looking at the line item budget, I'm just trying to understand, because again, it's more of a year-to-date kind of actual where we are. So, you know, if you look at the total development services budget with administration, community, small business development, licensing, housing, all cascading up to the overall budget, we adopted a budget of 4.1 million, and year-to-date, we're tracking 2.29 of that budget. And then obviously we're recommending essentially a level funding for fiscal year 2020. So I'm just trying to understand, you know, was that indicative of a lot of vacancies we had this year? So again, you know,
I would say that that's primarily due to vacancies. I mean, so as I started, which not including my position, you started a year with, you know, when I started, there were 17 vacancies, not including mine, and some of those vacancies were long-standing. So a lot of that is just due to vacancies and I'll say efficient hiring as we've gone through. But a lot of that was through vacancies, and because we had a lot of vacancies, programmatically, some of the soft costs that were in the budget weren't allocated. Or expended is probably a better way to say it. I don't think that'll be the case next year. I think we'll be closer to budget because we'll be closer to a full team. Mm-hmm. So we won't see the same level of savings, so to speak, on the budget side.
Okay. Couple more questions. Is there anything in the budget that you wish you had that you don't have? I know obviously, you know, you're trying to operate at capacity and build bandwidth and capacity, so it seems that that's really the priority for the next year, being able to operate at optimum levels given the vacancies that you have. But curious if, you know, there's something in the budget that you wish you had that didn't make the cut.
Well, I would say, one, we would look at having additional inspector positions. I think
additional what position? Inspector
positions, probably at least one on the building code side, and another on the housing code side. I would look to make sure that we had sufficient training dollars, particularly as building codes get more complicated and we have a new and more dynamic staff. Making sure that we have sufficient training to make sure that they're best in class and have community service skills is important. I'm not sure if this is a general fund expenditure or not, but you know, the development services offices is moving in October. Making sure that we have enough dollars and make sure that we can, you know, have the fit out that we need for our new office space, particularly to make sure that it is friendly to all the people who come and use it. And then I would I would be remiss in echoing comments from my peers, my team, to saying that overall, we would like the city to make an investment in services, in systems. A lot of our systems don't always talk together and need to be improved. I know MHS was here before me, but any investments that we can make in systems would be positive And then lastly, any support we can get in legal would be great as well. I know Corporation Counsel has an open position, but particularly as we intend to ramp up some of our enforcement activities and our disposition activities, making sure that we have responsive counsel is a way to make sure that things get done in a timely and effective manner.
Great, thank you. So 2 more questions. On your slide with respect to areas of increased focus where you have quality of life, neighborhood development, customer service, workforce development, which are all, great things and things that we should be doing and working towards doing them well and strategically. But I guess the one area that I do feel should be a priority that I know is, but just, having it as an increased priority, I think adds a lot of community and economic value for our city is one of a housing strategy. And with respect to, we have the lowest homeownership rate in our city. We have an aging housing stock. We are building a lot of downtown, new modern apartment buildings, but we have a lot of other neighborhoods that, have difficult, housing circumstances. And I think everybody's read the press with respect to the HUD properties in the North End. I know we've made investments in propping up and establishing a land bank so we can get better use and access and putting properties back to productive use. So there's, and I know we have a housing preservation loan and things of that nature. So there's like all these different challenges, resources, and opportunities that I don't see kind of in a strategic direction of housing and us understanding holistically what the gaps are and ensuring that we have adequate, affordable, moderate housing and home ownership across our city, and understanding where the gaps are and where we need to make investments, where we need to partner more with our state to ensure that we're advocating properly for housing investments or what have you. So I'm just curious to hear your thoughts and kind of where we are and ensuring that that's a priority, because we're building new schools. We're spending $100 million in MLK Weaver. We have Westbrook, Bowles Park coming online. But Blue Hills, taking that as an example, has an aging housing stock. So what are we doing to support the housing development so we can retain our families here and community here, but also attract new and grow?
So I'll respond in kind of 2 ways, or 3. So one, I acknowledge that that's a point. It is kind of embedded in that second bullet around neighborhood development, but I acknowledge it's not something that's broken out, just like we didn't break out kind of small business, and the fact that we need to do more things around encouraging small businesses as part of our larger economic development strategy. Now, specifically to things that we're attempting to do, is one, kind of as part of our efforts for this fiscal year, we're actually recommissioning an update to the housing study that was last done in 2014. So one of that is actually recommission the strategy that was done in last done in 2014 to update it to reflect what it is today. So we didn't put some of that into the 2020 budget because we feel like some of that is a 2019 activity that needs to be closed out there. And then I think the second part around how we're going to do that, which is again not a bullet, but we also have the POCD planning process that's going to go through this year, which will include a very significant housing component associated with it, particularly when we start having a neighborhood focus. So it is clearly part of what our strategy is. It was just not identified in the focus area, partially because we're going to have to cobble together resources to do that. Because aside from a small pot of resources that we can take out of our general capital budget for things, and the resources that are provided through home and CDBG resources, we just have a limited bucket of resources to address it. So This is not necessarily a plug for more resources at the time. It's just kind of an acknowledgement that as we develop a strategy, we'll be back to talk about how we resource that strategy.
Thank you. And last but not least, you can answer, you don't have to answer it now, you can just take the question and get back to me. But with respect to what policy recommendations do you have that can inform council in helping you do your job better and supporting the residents of Hartford? Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Deutsch, and then Councilwoman Fox.
Thank you. Could you explain to us in your own words, in a few words, the significance of the recent deed sale, that some properties were sold by anecdotally largely in the north end, some were withdrawn, and there was question of reserving some for land banks. Would you mind just saying a few words about your approach to that and what we can look forward to?
Sure. So there were 43 properties in the initial tax sale. Of the 43, 2 redeemed in the morning beforehand, so there were 41. Out of the 41, I made the recommendation to pull 6 off of the tax deed sale. One was 2, and there are bundles of 2 properties apiece. The first was the grocery store in the parking lot on Weston Street. The secondly was the club that's on Walnut, and the third group was the restaurant, the Brazzi's restaurant that's on Farmington. It's on Farmington. So based upon comments and concerns that I had from the neighborhood, I wanted to make sure that if we were, and given the amount of taxes that were owed on those 3 groups of properties, I wanted to make sure that we had a more transparent process to dispose of them than a blind tax sale auction. For example, if someone came and decided that they wanted to put a crazy club on Walnut Street through the tax sale process, we had no control of who that user would be. And if someone wanted to buy Brazzi's and then turn it to X, then the folks in the North End would not feel like they had were able to participate in that process. The direction was to the extent possible, try and get maximum tax value for the ones that we put out, which is part of the reason why we kept 29 properties of the 41 that were initially there. Others were, they were probably not as blighted, and the opportunity to return to tax-paying productive uses. We did our best to try and bid the debt to get it up. And I believe, and Jolita could correct me if I'm wrong, I think the tax sale netted around $459,000. For the ones that we retained, I think there is a larger strategy that we're going to bundle some of those up with some of the other city properties, and then transition them to the land bank, because we feel like programmatically we can make that an opportunity for individuals and small investors for home ownership, or to invest in their homes through a process that we can better control to make sure we have better outcomes. Right now for tax sale, you come with $5,000, you register, you get to be a developer. And that's great for some people, but sometimes that $5,000 is people are doing that without seeing the properties, completely without having access, and kind of speculative. So one, we want to make sure that people in the neighborhood want to do good work have the opportunity to do that, and then we can control the process to make sure that we get better outcomes.
There was one comment that I received just last night, if you don't mind, a person who wondered how widely we publicize these tax auctions and how much in advance. The observation was made,
So,
for one reason, found out about it the day before and couldn't scrutinize it and all that and raise the money. How are we doing in terms of giving plenty of notice and widespread publicity?
Right. So obviously I was there. I think I heard those concerns as well. I think clearly there are things that the city could have done better to advertise the tax deed process. And then there's also consideration that it could have happened on a Saturday as opposed to a Friday, to make sure that individuals who wanted to chance their luck at, buying one of these properties have the opportunity to do so. I know that there are plans to do another tax sale that, again, is going to focus on some blighted properties. I think we'll make those changes, and to the extent that we do things in coordination with the land bank, we'll make sure that it's done at a place and that's accessible, because I also heard like, well, you can only park at the library for 2 hours without getting a ticket. So all those feedbacks were taken in, and we're going to try and address them as we do it forward.
Hi.
Hello, Councilwoman Fox. How are you today?
Hello. Hi, y'all. I have to greet you how I greet everybody else. Okay, so I only have 2 questions. The first question you touched on a little bit through Council President's wish list question around technology. And specifically, my question is centered on licensing and inspection, housing code, but the process of follow through. So can you take me through what the Essentially, can you take me through what the process is for a housing code inspector to enter a place? What technology do they have at their disposal? What is missing? And have you done some kind of intake around how much it would cost to fill the gaps that you're noticing?
Okay, I'm going to try and succinctly answer this question. So housing code complaints typically come in one of 2 ways here. So it's either a call that gets picked up by 311 and then turned into a request, or someone calls directly into our office and is picked up by one of our administrative people. Then depending upon where the call is, our inspectors are slotted by zones. So typically what should happen is that an inspector will respond to the call, right? Notice it in 311 that they went out and did it, and then based upon the result of the inspection, right, we'll either issue a notice or a finding letter and then schedule a reinspection if something's there. Depending upon the nature of the violation, reinspections could take place in 24 hours for something that's emergent, for up to 30 days for something that's non-emergent but is a violation. And then at each time after the inspection is there, if there's an order letter, there should be an order letter that sends return receipt to the owner, and then there should be correspondence to make sure that that happens. That's how the process should go. Yeah? The process does not always go that way, right? So we use a system called InterGov to track our inspection activities. InterGov and 311 don't talk, right? So InterGov and 311 don't talk. So sometimes you'll see, if you look at the 311 call list, like, why do we have all these open housing code issues? Because it looks like we're not responding. That's because in order to respond to 311, we have to close out the case in InterGov where we've entered the information, and then manually or have one of our administrative folks go in and close it out in 311. That's no excuse for it not being done, which I want to be clarified. That's not an excuse for it not being done, but just is endemic of the fact that we don't have coordinated systems. Secondly, right now, all of these activities are taking place in paper form. So literally there's a person with a pad that goes out and fills those in, and when they come back at the end of the day, they're supposed to fill that out in the system to generate automatic letters. We have tough pads, but the tough pads aren't connected to the network, so we don't use them. So yes, we have some system and hardware things that we're working with. That is not an excuse for not meeting our service level agreements, because we know what we have to do. But yes, sometimes we have process breakdowns, which are our fault, which is why we're focusing on training. But there are some integrations and technology things that would be great, because yes, we have new tough books that don't connect it, but we bought them 2.5 years ago. So I wouldn't necessarily call them tough anymore.
Thank you. My second question is not related to technology at all, but
Okay.
How many new hires? You said you have 11 new hires, right?
Yes.
How many of them are Hartford residents?
How many? I do not completely know the answer to that question right now. I know a couple of them have to be. So I don't have the answer. I will get that information back to you. I just
Thank
do
you.
not.
Councilwoman Clark?
Thank you, Madam President. To follow up on Councilwoman Fox's question, how many of your staff are bilingual?
Are bilingual.
I'm helping y'all out today.
I do
I'm reading your
not know how many of our staff are bilingual, and I don't know how many of the new staff that we've hired on the planning team are bilingual. But I will say we have acknowledged that one of the barriers in the permitting process has been that we didn't have someone who was bilingual on the desk. So we reassigned personnel to make sure that that was the case.
What about in housing code?
In the housing code, I think 2 of the 5. 2 of the 5.
And which I probably, I'm going to ask for my colleague, the majority leader, what about Bosnian as well?
Excuse me?
Bosnian, does anybody in your team speak Bosnian?
I might say Albanian, but I wouldn't
Or
say
Albanian?
Bosnian.
We know 4 languages, if you want.
What would you say?
I said, I know 4 languages.
Okay,
That
well,
counts.
then you count then, right?
I'm not sure I'm not sure if we speak Arabic or Bosnian, but I do know one of our inspectors speaks Albanian.
And the reason why we're asking is because we have an annual influx of more people coming into our city that are more diverse in their culture. So we just want to make sure that the team that we have on the front line is able to effectively communicate with the general public. So moving on.
Fair point.
What's the plan under development services to support our small business infrastructure, as far as growing the number of small businesses or just providing them the resources that they need to be successful?
So under a revision that we're proposing to this year's budget that probably will come to you as an amendment, we're proposing a reallocation of resources for a couple of things. One, through CDBG, we're going to be announcing a small micro grant program, which will be targeted for neighborhoods. Secondly, we're going to propose I'll call it a lease subsidy or lease buy down model. But this predates me, but I understand that in Hartford there was a program that was encouraging that was designed to encourage retail development in downtown and other places where we bought down some of the lease costs so people didn't have the full brunt of trying to figure out their business, started off, do marketing, and then have a $5,000 kind of note that they had to pay to their landlord. And sometimes it was the burden of trying to pay your lease exceeded the burden of trying to figure out how you're going to build your business. And then third, we're working with, we're trying to put a plan in place with the new Chamber of Commerce and Reset to actually it's a corny name and it'll get better, but kind of a Main Street Accelerator program. As a number of you know that there are focuses on this innovation economy, and that right now it has 3 stools that have been published. One is in advanced manufacturing, one is in healthcare, one is in insurance. We actually want to create a fourth leg to that stool, which is around small business investment and lifestyle businesses, because not everybody's going to be a manufacturer and not everybody's going to be in a venture-based business. So whether you're talking about the company who wants to be the web designer or in environmental services or just to really want to have a good restaurant, we don't feel like we've dedicated enough resources to that. So we're trying to put together a small pool of resources for that and then leverage it with some of the chamber's resources and then go directly to some of the banks to help them as well. So that's something that we plan on rolling out next year if everything works right.
Now, is that just restricted to downtown?
No.
Vacant area? Okay,
No.
that's through the city.
No.
Throughout the city. That's wonderful. Predating you and predating this current administration, there was a department within your department that you oversee called MECA, which was marketing, events, and cultural affairs, right? Within your budget, what is going to be allocated, or what do you foresee how your marketing, the city to attractable businesses, the events that are taking place, just so that we can bring more tourism and more development and investment to our city, since because the Hartford Current article recently released saying that tourism in Connecticut was up, which brought in a significant amount of money. So I'm just trying to figure out how do we do that on a smaller scale so that we can look to increase our grant list.
So I would say there's, again, and these are probably small, kind of more guerrilla marketing tactics, just based on budget. But one thing that we're trying to do is support people who are already doing good stuff, where we haven't necessarily supported them before. So a good example of that is the Bid, who actually has a website. They do marketing and promotions. Typically, we've not given them any resources, so we're going to try and do that. But then more directly, no Mecca in its prior form doesn't exist. We actually have, that falls under Don Chapman. We have one person who does special events now, and we've made an offer to a second person to actually do special events and actually inform our digital marketing strategy. And we are currently in negotiations with a couple of different groups around storytelling. One of the things that I found, as some of you know, some of you are part of these conversations, there are a number of people right now that are trying to figure out how to market and brand Hartford. Whether that's iQuilt, whether that's Metro Hartford Alliance, whether that's Innovation Places, there's a bunch of people who are doing that. So one, I think part of our role is to make sure that we're all telling one story, not telling 5 different ones. So we're actively involved in that. And I think the other piece, as people are trying to figure out what the unique Hartford cute tagline is, that instead of trying to figure that out immediately, what we need to do is tell a collection of stories about what is actually happening in Hartford that are authentic, and let the feedback from that storytelling activity dictate what our thing is. We've talked to marketing consultants and folks there. It's just that we've not found the thing that actually mirrors what we want to do with downtown versus what we want to do in the neighborhood. And the one thing that I've learned in 7 months is that if we don't have an inclusive story, then it'll be problematic. And then more importantly, I don't want to tell a story that's not inclusive. So we've allocated resources to address that a little bit in our current budget. And then going forward, we put additional resources in our next year's budget to try and develop that.
Thank you. My last question regarding our fiber optic network in our city, and given the fact that once upon a time there, I don't remember how exactly it was done, but there was actually free Wi-Fi available to residents of the city of Hartford. And given the fact that everything is now being streamlined to the internet, homework, applying for jobs, et cetera, how is it that we now can make sure that not just residents, but business owners as well, small business owners are able to be connected to the internet as far as Wi-Fi, so that they can be better in their studies and better as a business owner?
We agree. I think connectivity is going to be the next differentiator for cities and communities, and the digital divide is real. And if we don't address that, then our ability to compete and perform and grow will be impacted. I would say right now, a lot of the discussion is about what we are going to do or not do concerning 5G. That's the verb of that is the term of the day. Right now, I think there's a play that is going on between some of the larger cities. So Hartford, New Haven, Bridgeport, and Stanford are part of a coalition that is trying to figure out a set of uniform standards. And then, and on the other side, you have the governor's office who's trying to look at doing the same thing. So I would say that I do not have enough information to give you right now, but there are a couple of different working groups that are on it, and then probably within the next quarter or so, we would like to come back and give you a briefing on recommended options for 5G, and then how we would deploy a network. Because the other piece, and if my peers from engineering were here, they would say that because you have multiple carrier interests out at the same time, none of them wanted the same thing. It's kind of We're trying to coordinate a series of construction activity here and then make sure that activity doesn't just become a downtown loop, but also gets pushed out to neighborhoods. So we'd like to get back to you probably about a quarter or so, just because we have not heard yet from the governor's office, but there is a strategy that's emerging from all 4 of the major cities with the idea that if we can get one standard, that we can drive some efficiencies.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. I have a couple of questions. So for the presentation that you provided us with the summaries, in terms of the areas of focus, under quality of life, the new zoning administration positions, can you describe what those positions would be?
So up until recently, we've not had any zoning enforcement officers. So we look at quality of life issues around automotive repair and used car dealerships, and why do they have all their cars all across the street in places that they need to be, around places where there's illegal dumping, or other kind of itinerant uses that, where people are either open too late, not on the right time, have done things that, were not under their certificate of occupancy. So we think that that's another enforcement mechanism that we want to take advantage of, so that just our general street presence look better, and that we are better policing who's playing by versus who's not playing by the rules in a way that are not typically things that the police would answer to.
Okay, so that would go in line with what you mentioned earlier, which is you currently have two zoning inspectors?
We have 2 positions, one which is currently filled. So we're looking to fill, or may have even made an offer out to fill the 2nd position.
Okay. And so, as a quality of life issue, certainly we've seen a lot, especially in the media these days, on housing and housing code in general. At one point, this was some time ago though, at one point we had over 20 housing inspectors, and throughout the years we've decreased the number, and as you mentioned, right now we have 5. And so when we were looking at the initial public hearing presentation that was presented on April 23rd, and I know you don't have this in front of you, but I'll summarize it. On page 15 of the presentation that we received, it said that the key priorities, key investment in quality of life, it mentioned, rodent control inspectors, it mentioned forestry unit for DPW, additional staff in DPW, and it said another bullet point was make necessary investment in traffic control improvements, improve pedestrian and vehicular safety. So those are the main bullet points in that page in terms of the spotlight on key priorities on quality of life. I bring this up because, as we've seen, there's been a lot of concerns on housing inspections and housing code enforcement. And so was wondering if, well, first, let me ask the first question on that. How much revenue do we generate from those 5 inspectors being able to go out and cite people and the fines that have been accrued?
I don't know the answer to that question, and I would say that fines are important, but I would not necessarily define them as a revenue item only for this purpose, that it's a fine that gets imposed on the land record, and the only time you actually can get to collect that fine is if there's a real estate transaction that is taking place. So there's either a sale, transfer, or refinancing of the property. So I don't want to put that in the revenue bucket because it's not there. I would say that there are things that we probably need to do to our housing code enforcement strategy that we're not doing, because housing code as an ordinance matter, right, is by nature a reactionary exercise, right? I have my windows are busted, my heat's not on, I'm calling someone for help to respond to a condition that is there, and then the city is trying to help police that condition to a more positive outcome. I think there are ways that we need to be more proactive in our approach to housing issues. I'm not going to say to housing issues. One of those initially was the idea of doing a residential license program, which again, I said that given the fact to do it, it is not cost neutral. You don't have the systems in place. So it was my recommendation to do that. However, I do think there are some existing ordinances that we have, like our certificate of occupancy program, that if modified, where you can have some self-cert, put people on a biannual schedule, it might be a way to, more proactively address housing quality issues, with at the same time trying to create a venue that, one, did not seem like an additional tax to homeowners, but then also better addressed the need to proactively mitigate potential housing code issues. So I think programmatically, those are things that we have to put in place that will require less of an additional resource requirement, but at the same time would not feel as though it was an imposition on multifamily property owners. Because the last thing I want to do is feel like I'm trying to tax property owners additionally, because then you also default into the you're picking on me because I'm a good landlord, as opposed to not necessarily picking on bad landlords who have 14 different addresses in 3 different states and you can't get. So the short answer is we want to try and add additional tools to the toolkit. They will require some regulatory reform, and as we get through some of the cleanup of our current ordinances and some of the cleanup on things around relocation, which have cost the city probably unnecessarily a large number of resources, then we want to move to that.
If we were to hire, say, 2 additional inspectors for housing code, would, by virtue of, or even 1.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Actually, the direct answer to that question is, and those fees, we've generated $165,000 year to date.
Well, I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
So Councilmember Fox asked how much money we had generated, or you did, I'm sorry. It's $165,000 year to date.
$165,000.
The $165,000 in certificate of occupancy fees, those are actual general fund revenues. I'm not counting any liens and stuff that have been imposed but not collected.
Okay. And so could it be possible, if we increase the number of housing code inspectors, that by virtue of increasing the workers, we would be able to potentially generate, whether it's more occupancy fees or other types of revenue that would potentially pay for itself? Is that something that's feasible?
I would say my experience in New Haven would be that you would have to, that yes, but the catch-up would take 5 years to do that. So one, there's not a short-term piece to that. Secondly, you have to do some regulatory reform, because again, housing code is a reactionary piece. So you would have to do some type of modified certificate of occupancy program. And I think the only way that you could probably get it to some type of cost net neutral effect was if you put in some type of self-certification option, with the saying that you would do random inspections on individuals that would self-certify, because that's the only way you could do it, meet the time requirements to inspect within a rational period of time, and then set up a cost structure that made sense. So we can put together kind of a business model for you that kind of walks through. We've talked about this with the team. We've just not had the opportunity to operationalize it.
That would be great, thank you. We look forward to that in the future at the committee level. The other question that I had, this relates. Okay. So this is on section 25-6, under small businesses requests. It says there's an estimated of 750 small business requests for fiscal year 2020. And I'm wondering why the data is not available for the previous years.
That's an error on our part. I would say that we've had some modified spreadsheets that we've used to collect information, and we've not invested or used in some type of CRM system to do that. That was identified as a deficiency, and that has been changed. So I would say going forward, we've purchased, not through MHIS, but we've purchased a CRM system that we can now better use to track that data. So again, this was a systems issue on our part. It's not that Mr. Chapman and his team don't talk to a lot of businesses. It's just that there's not been a really great way to organize and aggregate those conversations to any meaningful data. We realize that's a weakness. We're working to change that, and going forward, we'll be able to be more on point with our reporting.
My last question. You mentioned InterGov doesn't speak with 311. In your experience and your expertise, how can we make it so that we have systems that speak to one another when inspections occur?
I can say that the COO's office and MHIS are investigating a new software platform right now. It's the same group that actually provides the 311 system, and I think they're doing their due diligence on it. And I would just say that it's probably a 2 to 3 year undertaking, and if we're going to do it, we're going to have to resource it appropriately because doing system integrations are a bear. So I think MIS knows that this is an issue. They're trying to figure out what the right solution is, and then I would say that to council, as unsolicited advice, if that's something that the city decides that it wants to do, I would encourage us to resource the implementation appropriately, or you'll get another fragmented system.
Thank you.
Councilwoman Rosado, and then Assistant Majority Leader Gale, and then Majority Leader Sanchez.
So, hi, good evening.
Good evening.
I have a question with the promotions that were done in development services. How long ago did they take place?
3 months ago. I would say they've taken place within. All taken place within the last 3 months.
The last what?
3 months.
3 months. And on the promotions, you said one Hispanic was promoted. From what to what?
She was a. What was she prior to that? Yes. She got promoted from an administrative analyst to a program manager position in housing code.
Okay. And so if you don't have an answer for my next question, you can send an email. So we had the issue with the gas stations. So they were given a 6 months permit, right? And based on that permit, I guess L&I was going to determine if they would go back to the 24 hours based on the performance for 6 months. So I'd like to know what type of plan you have going forward with that when their permit is up.
So as I understand it, and then the way that we were sued and lost, that the ordinance that we currently use to monitor, to determine hours, needs to be changed to give the city more latitude in working with the police to establish what work hours are. And Corporation Counsel is leading that process. To the extent that people have applied for extensions that were previously denied, we've not stopped anyone who was previously denied from getting a new permit with extended hours.
from getting on you? I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
For reissuing that permit with extended hours, and the intent for the 6 month was, one, to do it on a trial basis, and then secondly, to make sure that hopefully we had new ordinances in place within 6 months that would give us better direction in setting time, the amount of hours that they could be open.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that was not clear. So, one, this is being led by Corporation Counsel. So I'm reacting to what is being a change in legislation that was initially established by Corporation Counsel. Two, we understand that because we lost a court case, everyone that was denied an extended permit, as I understand it, has been reissued a new permit extending their hours. And then the hope is that within 6 months, we'll either extend them to make their new hours permanent, or we'll have new legislation in place that allows for the police to give their opinion as what their hours of operation should be. So that is everybody's there. We're still working on it. We'll probably hope to have some type of revised legislation within the next 6 months.
Okay. So could we get a list of every single gas station that has been given extended hours? Because it's my understanding that this was not automatically done. If they were open until 10 o'clock and they did not reapply for a permit, one was not given or a letter wasn't sent out.
I can only speak to everyone who's come to my office requesting an increase in hours has gotten an increase in hours.
Okay.
So we have not denied anyone for a new increase.
Right, because I think, just to interject here, just to make the distinction, that it's not automatic that you get one of these permits. You actually have to go request a permit for the extension. So if they didn't go and request for an extension, they're not going to get it. They're operating under the existing ordinance and hours that they're allowed it.
So I have no basis to deny anyone anymore, but they still have to ask for the extended permit. So
And I understand that, but just to be clear, I have spoken with some of the gas station owners who have a language barrier. And yes, they're small business owners. It should be their responsibility to check, but I think that it should be our responsibility, because they are taxpayers also, that we have a more friendlier system that says, you know what, these options are available for you right now. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think it might be helpful, because I understand that if Development Services to some extent knows who those operators are that are having issues, then we can present that and facilitate that discussion. I apologize, I'm losing my voice. But I think that's something that we can do as well.
Councilmember Rosado, we'll circle back to you and we'll address people that you feel have those concerns. We don't want to see you as being a barrier to something that people are entitled to.
Majority Leader Sanchez? Gail, and then Sanchez.
Thank you. And thank you for the presentation this evening. And I must say, most of the questions that I had have already been asked and answered, so I'm just going to give you a comment and then ask one little question. I want to compliment the department and thank you for ramping up the workforce, ramping up the numbers. It's been somewhat distressing to have a planning department with one planner or maybe two planners in it, especially when we'd all like to see some growth in this city. And some of that can't take place without competent planners being on staff, and likewise with building inspectors. Last thing we need is for people who are trying to build here to walk away from the city saying, I can't work with that department. And those are comments certainly that I've heard in the past. So I'm glad to see that we've got our numbers up, and I hope that we continue to work well with folks that come in looking to develop, and folks that are building, folks that are rehabbing, in all of those different ways. So thank you for that. The one small question I have is very specific, has to do with the new zoning regulations that adopted something called accessory dwelling units. And I'm just wondering if we have had anybody apply for and been granted an accessory dwelling unit, and you can give me the answer offline on that.
That is a very specific question, council member, that I cannot answer at this time, but we will get that answer for you. And on behalf of my team, which I really appreciate, thank you for your compliment. We will be coming back to ask for more resources at some point, though, because I do agree if we hit the next growth point, our ability to service folks who are coming for permits or inspections, we will not be able to meet that. So if we continue to grow, we will raise the white flag for help.
Those will be good problems to have. I look forward to those problems.
Evening.
Good evening, Councilmember Sanchez.
So my question is about the opportunity zone.
Okay.
So we have opportunity zone in the north end, right? In the North Meadows.
Yes.
Okay. But we don't have any in the South Meadow, am I correct?
No, that is not correct.
No? So we do?
Yes.
All right. The opportunity zone, the purpose of this is for development. Or can you explain it to me, what's the purpose?
So yes, the Opportunity Zone is a tool that was created by the Trump administration in last year's budget to facilitate investment in distressed communities. It's for individuals who have capital gains and then want to invest those capital gains in distressed areas for a certain set of benefits that have been established. As of date, there are probably 100 plus OZ funds that have been established. I have been working partially under the mayor's direction to establish an opportunity zone strategy for the city of Hartford. All of the city of Hartford's opportunity zones are located in neighborhoods, so downtown is not eligible. So what it means is that we've been working steadily to develop a pipeline of projects that can attract investment. So we see it as a tool, and some of the projects are real. For example, Park and Main is in an opportunity zone, and the Spinnaker Freeman team are going to take advantage of that financing to help fill gaps. Other projects, like things that we're talking about in the North End or in Parkville, are a little more aspirational, and we're working with consultants and property owners to build projects that will be investment grade. So, there's a race. I would say that we're not going to be always going to be the first people out of the gate just because we're going to have to build some of these projects, but we think that 2020 will be a strong year for us.
Okay, so will the riverfront properties qualify as an opportunity zone?
On the north or the south end of town?
Both. We have approximately 30 acres in the north, right? North Meadows.
Is the airport an opportunity zone? I don't remember if the airport is an opportunity zone, and I don't think I don't think it on the north end. I think it doesn't go east of the train tracks. So I think the train tracks are because they were defined by the census tract. I don't think it goes east of the train track. Although I do believe parts of the south end, and I'm not sure if it extends all the way to the water, is. So it's more likely that the south end, because of the boundaries, particularly around the airport, are, but I can't speak for whether or not the waterfront on the North Meadows is included, because I think the boundary might stop at Windsor Street.
So am I correct to say that the Hartford Redevelopment Authority has that power to dictate which property falls or can be added on the opportunity zone for development?
No, the opportunity zones were set by census guidelines for distressed census tracts. So just as though we couldn't add downtown, we couldn't add another neighborhood census tract to be it. And as I'm looking at the opportunity zone map now, yes, the South Meadows, including the riverfront, is included, but as I suspected, the North Meadows is not, and the boundary is in fact like Windsor Street.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm just curious, what's the difference between that zone, the opportunity zone, and the enterprise zone?
The
Is
state
the
enterprise zone?
more commercial?
The state enterprise zone, and people will get this wrong, is a more of a tax mechanism that if you get a designation that the state theoretically will give you some pilot payment relief on the investments that's being made in those zones pending the availability of funds. Where the opportunity zone itself is a mechanism for individuals with capital gains to invest in projects in a targeted area in exchange for getting tax deferrals.
Right, okay. Thank
I can give you more information. It's way more technical than that. Right. And for those who actually know what they are, I apologize for giving such a high-level response.
So one is a federal program and one is a state program, the enterprise zone. But theoretically, you could have an opportunity zone that's in an enterprise zone
Yes.
and double the incentive.
Yes.
Exactly, it's in the promise zone, right? So
Right.
you layer those
Well-
incentives on top.
And it's an incentive because I believe if I was looking into it, and I believe if it's my right understanding, is that if I was to invest in the opportunity zone, and let's say, the taxes is 50,000 or so, right? If I understand it, it's not a write-off, but it's a tax break, and after 10 years, I wouldn't have.
So what it is, so in that example, you are a business owner, right? You did really well last year. So you have capital gains in the amount of X. You want to invest those capital gains into a new project. You can invest them in that project, and for up to 10 years, or depending upon when you want to bring your money out, that money can stay in there deferred, so you don't have to pay the taxes on that gain for a period up to a year. And then any money that you make on that investment is tax deferred indefinitely.
That's where.
And so, yes, as the council president says, you can double down in having multiple incentives that might be either for other federal or state investments based upon the location of the project.
Right. Okay. And that will help us with development, of course.
It can be another source of the capital stack for the right project because it's clear that it's not free money, and the individuals that are having, even though they're getting the tax deferral, are still expecting a market return or a close to market return for the investment. So it's kind of like that, those of you old enough to remember that commercial about 3M, it doesn't make the deal better. It doesn't make the deal, it makes the deal better. So it's an enhancement, not necessarily a deal maker.
Okay, thank you.
Just as a follow-up, can you just make sure that my colleagues all have the opportunity zone map
Yes.
for Hartford? Thank you. Councilman Deutsch.
Just one brief follow-up. Did you say that the tax deferral is indefinite?
There is, it might not be indefinite because, like I said, there are two benefits. So there are dual benefits. So A, if I make an investment, an initial capital gain investment in that. So my initial $5 million of capital gains that I invest in Elda Sanani Development LLC, right? There is a period of time where where you don't have to pay the capital gains on that, the tax on the capital gains for that investment, right? Then, if Elda Sanani Development LLC makes money, right? I know those additional capital gains are deferred indefinitely under the terms of the current law.
Okay. What
It's
I
a
was
good
going to
deal.
ask is, what office is responsible for following up, when there's a tax fixing agreement, a more traditional TFA, I have a hard time. What's the location of the office? Who follows up that
So
there's
on
compliance?
opportunity zones, because it's a federal program, it's governed by the U.S. Treasury and the IRS,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So if you have a tax fixing agreement that is local, right, then that's usually done in a coordination between our office and the assessor's office to make sure in compliance, because there's three pieces of that, right? One, did you do what you said that you were going to do, and what does the agreement say? That is typically negotiated by the development services in concert with corporation counsel. And then to the extent that there are other community benefits or other things that were required out of that tax fixing agreement, those are typically evaluated by the compliance division of the state.
By what?
Compliance.
Compliance, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay, thank you. That concludes our session for this evening. Appreciate you and the team coming out and for your partnership and growing our city and making investments in our neighborhood. We appreciate that, and we look forward to continuing to dialogue with you as we go through this budget process. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Next, I don't know what happened to my voice, but hey, I guess it may be getting late, so. Next up, we have the Hartford Parking Authority, so let's try to make this quick. Which I have a feeling, I'm gonna keep my fingers crossed on this one.
You can have it, or if you want to confirm, because I don't think that you guys, that's what's gonna make 6.2.
Yeah.
But it's okay.
Oh, no, yeah, because we have big projects coming.
Oh, you guys can have them. When you have those projects and anything you have for FY19 and going FY20, can you send me a list of the projects that has been in 19 and it's going to be in 19 and for 20, because as I go in more, when the revenues increase, I have to explain of what projects. You remember that question we asked you on a year ago? Thank you. Yes, exactly, because if that's the revenue gonna reach 6.2, I am gonna need to explain it. Okay, I mean, it's a good thing.
That's a good explanation. But
Yes,
also we have the revised policy, because right now we are asking for AIA document, like the last estimated construction cost, which before we didn't ask. So we are generating revenues in addition to that.
That I have, perfect.
Just changing policies.
Yes. So, okay, perfect. But they
Great job, Ellen. You were fantastic.
I was fantastic.
Of course.
Yeah, if you just want to know. That's what I'm saying. But if it's going to be something higher,
Well, we're trying to.
Popping up every now and then.
Yeah, if we need anything.
But we should be short and sweet
Yeah.
unless somebody has any.
Yeah, just like we got too long. In and out. Oh, yeah, yes, let's go. Perfect, thank you.
That's the parking authority. Pardon me? Would you like a water?
No, I'm all set.
I'm all set. Thank you very much. I could use a large pizza though. How's it going?
Budget analyst.
How you doing?
A long day.
Long week, right?
Been a long budget season, but here we are.
How are you, Councilman? we're just looking to wrap this one up, so make it a night.
Sorry to hold you up.
Councilman Gale.
Nice to meet you.
We worked with Councilman on Hartford, it was prior to you, and possibly for the health department. I worked with Dino, at least I'm trying to work with Dino. Dino, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I still would love to pursue the idea of something extended. I mean, I think we could do it. He's not committed. He will work committed, and I would be his chief advocate. But you know, he talks. Yeah, he's more. You know, he's just so focused in his kitchen. I can't get him focused on. You know, getting him be a great patio. Everybody needs a patio. You know, but at some point, there's some great plans for Main Street that may end up sticking. We'll figure it out. I hope it's not too late for him.
No, it's a great restaurant.
Yeah, it really is.
So we're looking to finish off the day.
You are so lucky that Cynthia Jennings is not on council.
Well, I remember last year, the first time I came up there last year, and it had nothing to do with the budget. It was all about the concessions, and even because of her, I put numbers in there. I'm no fool.
What happened?
So you're
Okay, we're gonna get started. I don't know how we got off track, but we're gonna get started. Please, council people, take your seats. Please take your seats.
Tried to be brief, man.
We
You
are
did
starting.
well. You did
Thank
very
you.
well.
Okay, Hartford Parking Authority is up. Mr. Mindo Gomes.
We're all alone.
Good to see you. Oops. We will give you the floor. You can go through your presentation. If you had some advanced questions, feel free to go right into those and answer them. Other than that, we will open it up to Q&A when you are done. You have the floor. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President, Councilwomen, Councilmen. Thank you for the opportunity to present today. If you will, our charter has not, our mission hasn't changed. The only thing I do want to highlight is partner with the city to improve economic and community development, which we are striving to do a little bit better on. This is a new chart. It's more of a flat than it was last year. Everybody's reporting up into the organization, but it is a change from the previous year. I want to highlight some of the areas that from prior year. We established a year-round use of 1212 Main Street off-street lot, which is part of the Dono in 2018, which generated an additional $252,000 over budget. That trend continues in fiscal year 2019. HPA further increased Dono use, generating an additional $42,900 over previous year. Initiated and completed a full update of all HPA signs and street striping within the downtown pay for park zone, which included handicap and fire hydrants. We restriped all of the HPA off-site lots in Mac Garage, and we completed Mac Garage improvements, which consisted of concrete repairs, new gates and management operation systems, security cameras, handicap walkways, ramps, pedestrian door access, palm pushers, and full striping and landscaping. Strategic initiatives are develop outline processes to legally pursue out-of-city, state past due citations, and we work on that diligently. Develop a plan to utilize load zones for food delivery, grab-and-go type services in support of the brick-and-mortar restaurants. Work with development services to identify parking lot opportunities to support busy thoroughfares with off-street parking, and to offset school parking lot needs during winter snow emergency events. We support DPW in areas where sanitation routes struggle due to lack of or a shortage of proper signs. And we continue to exploit technologies already owned, such as our app, the kiosks, the Genetec equipment on the vehicles, and the VATS violation system. If we go into our budget, you'll notice that we're projecting our 2020 fiscal year to be 11% over this year. Dono, in particular, we're going to be up close to 10% with an overall 10.9% increase. I just want to point out that that number does not include an additional $270,000 that goes to R&R. Budget highlights and areas of focus. Revenue increase of 11% from 19 to 20 is driven by a creation of a downtown premium on-street parking zone fee increase. And one of the potential callouts is FY 2020 budget constraints as they relate to the loss of city-owned off-street parking with the startup of Dono development. Community engagement. We've provided free parking for Hartford-based events, HPD cadet training, shoes for the homeless, safe and free Halloween, movie night in Hartford, Yard Goat Fan Fest, Food Share Walk, Hartford Dental Clinic, and so on. We participate in meetings within the Hartford NRZs. We expanded and look to expand free holidays on-street parking to align with the city holidays, most likely and including MLK Day. We posted additional on-street signs, apps, residential and handicap to assist parkers, additional content on our website, and we use every interaction as an opportunity to learn and inform. One of the other areas that from the appendix that I'm going to just call out real quick, if we can. Yep. Citations issued from April 18 to April 19, total 62,627. 65% of that, or 41,000 plus, is non-Hartford residents, with 34.5% being Hartford. Specific areas that we're improving to assist Hartford residents are the new residential parking signs, which I've depicted one there, and we're refreshing odd, even sanitation signs where they're missing and or not visible. We did have some questions that I will go through now. Question 1. Are there any private parking lots in Hartford that don't charge on weekends? Are there any private parking lots in Hartford that stop charging after 6 p.m. on weekdays? The answer is there is no private lots in Hartford that do not charge every day, including Saturdays, Sundays, and holidays. Second question. How much could potentially be made by charging for weekend parking fee in Hartford? I would only propose Saturdays as opposed to Saturday and Sunday. And with the additional enforcement costs that figured in, it would be somewhere around $200,000. Third question. Has Hartford Parking Authority done a cost-benefit analysis for having parking on weekends and as well as extending parking fees to evening hours during the weekday? The answer is we have, and the figure includes the additional enforcement, would be in the area of $250,000 or $250,000. Last question. Every other city, including New Haven and even our neighboring towns like West Hartford, charge for parking on weekends. Is there a reason for Hartford not to be competitive in charging parking on the weekends? The answer, most major cities only charge for parking on Saturday as opposed to Saturday and Sunday, allowing for free parking on Sunday. After 6 in Hartford, and the reason we're looking at it is after 6 in Hartford, the activity in the downtown area is still sparse during the week, which tells me that we still have a way to go in drawing people to activities in the downtown. Saturdays are a bit more active, but still nowhere close to New Haven, West Hartford, or Middletown in comparison. Our current plan is to slightly increase rates in the off-street lots, the Mac Garage, and in the downtown premium zone, and to review extended hours on Saturday during fiscal year 2021 budget, which would also include possibly looking at the rates that we're charging for for the Dunkin' Donuts Stadium. With that, I open it up to questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Assistant Majority Leader Gale.
Thank you, Mr. Gomes. Just a couple of questions, if I may, on a couple of fairly specific things. You mentioned developing a plan to utilize different parking zones, and a very specific example for you of a parking zone that existed and went away and maybe should come back. On Asylum Street, there is a retail store, Spiritus Wines, that is located across from Max Downtown. They used to have 2 parking spaces that were 15 minutes only. And those 2 spaces somehow disappeared when Asylum Street got redone about 2 years ago. I think they could use them back again, specifically to your grab-and-go type, you know, for that business. It's a business that I've patronized, and they've complained to me about it. So I would ask you to take a look at that at some point. Another just, you know, as I'm navigating Hartford issue, the kiosk on Talcott Street, outside of the entrance to Development Services, has no Wooner numbers on it. So I'm unable to use my app at that kiosk because there doesn't seem to be a zone. I don't know if that's...
The number would not be on the kiosk. They would be on a...
There's no number anywhere. Unless I'm blind, there's no number anywhere there.
Some of those signs do fall off. The original ones that we got from the passport supplier are plastic in nature and come off very easy. We've been replacing them with metal-based signs as of late. And I can tell you, Councilman, that since coming on in the past 14 months, primarily the first 6 months that I was here, we put up, from a Wooner standpoint, we put up an additional 150 signs that were in the office when I first got there. And by virtue of doing that, the app usage went up in the past 6 months by 199%. So if we're missing one, I apologize, and we will look at that specifically. But we look at the streets on a regular basis.
No, good for you. I mean, listen, I love the app, and I show everybody the app. You know, still not widely known as far as I can tell, and people are still fishing around trying to deal with the kiosk while I'm walking away pressing my buttons and telling them, well, look, guys, you could be doing this too. So that's a great addition. Last question. And, you know, something just to think about and, you know, maybe get back to us on. One of the things that I've seen in other communities is where you have a lot of red curbing that helps to define where it's legal to park and where it's not legal to park. And this question kind of came up, I think it was last week or at some point in time. We had some questions about new fine structure where it stated, you know, 10 feet from a fire hydrant or 25 feet from a corner. Well, of course, how do you measure that stuff? So we don't have that red curb system. I'm just wondering if that's anything you've thought about doing at any point in time, and whether it's something we might look forward to at some point in time.
I want to first answer your question about the 15-minute parking spots. We are looking at every street, specifically around restaurants, to ensure that we give that opportunity as business changes. So we will look at that quite heavily. And to answer your question is we do not have red curb, but I've been working with DPW. And as we go through NRZs, the first complaint that I get is that people are parked too close to either driveway and or a curve. And they want me to go out there with a tape measure on the 5 feet, which is the ordinance, and they want me to tag everybody. Unfortunately, we can't do that. And if you look at the congested neighborhoods that we have, Parkville, Frog Hollow, things of that nature, by eliminating that much parking space, we'd have an uproar. So what we're doing, and what I agreed with DPW, is that we would pick a couple of streets in a couple of neighborhoods, and that we would go 3 feet and put a mark at the 3 feet on either side. and that we would then work with the NRZs and also with city and our own web to introduce that theory and to get that information out. And then we would start supporting it by putting warnings on vehicles before we started citing. So we are looking at that, but in the long run, it would mean that we'd probably have to look at an ordinance to make that change. But the pilot would be that we would do it at the 3 feet to, so that, and depict it with either a blue line or something that's visible so that our enforcement team would be able to notice it quickly.
You got to ask all of her questions.
I am. I'm going to ask everybody's questions so we can get out of here. Thank you for your presentation. It was always very thorough. Appreciate the work that you've been doing so far in such a short span of time. Regarding helping out the businesses, I had a business constituent reach out to my office, and which is perfect timing that you're here, regarding the putting up, limiting the parking in front of businesses so that other people that want to patronize the business can be able to park. The address is 868 Park Street. Los Cubanitos. You gotta help.
Cubanitos.
Yes, thank you. Bakery. They are in desperate need of a parking sign in front of their building because this is by people just parking there that is detracting people from coming into the business to patronize. So my request is if we can put a sign up there to limit the parking, because I don't think there's that many around that Park Street area.
This past week, I met with the SAMA organization.
Okay.
And we are looking at putting meters on Park Street.
Okay.
And as part of that, we have discussions around while I was eating a sandwich from that bakery, we had a discussion.
That's why he's looking at me like that. Huh?
So we're looking at a couple of blocks of doing a pilot. There still is some legwork to be done because, as you know, there's other hurdles. The bid is involved, so I'm meeting, as a matter of fact, on Friday with Julio Concepcion, so we could try to identify who else other than the Chief of Staff to the Mayor we have to start talking to. And as you know, the sidewalks on Park Street are being redone by DPW. Right. We're taking the opportunity now so that we could put up the proper signs to make sure that we have, 2-hour, half-hour, depending on where it is and what businesses are in the area. And it's also engaging the merchants in that neighborhood. So that's why we're picking a couple of blocks so that we could utilize it. But perfect timing, and thank you for the question.
Yes, you're welcome. So you can just keep that in mind of this establishment there. And,
we wrote it down, and I'll look at that over the next couple of days.
Thank you, and just keep me informed as to how those meetings are, and I'm open to my schedule allows attending those meetings.
Excellent.
Too.
I may need council support as we're moving forward because it's not only Park Street. We're also looking at other areas that are congested. When I'm talking about Park Street, it doesn't end at the railroad tracks. It actually goes all the way up into West Hartford because Parkville is just as congested. Then we're talking about where other businesses are going and it's getting congested, Bartholomew Avenue and Parkville, Capitol Avenue. There's other areas that from a development standpoint, working with development services and DPW, I think that, as the city grows, we need to be cognizant of.
Okay.
Thank you.
Regarding the booting process, when we had amended the ordinance to lessen the amount of parking violations which triggered a boot on a car, how much revenue has that produced?
I don't have that exact number, but I will get you what the booting. Please understand that the booting process or the immobilization, what that takes into consideration isn't only the citations that the individual had before then. It also takes into consideration the actual booting process and then the towing and then whatever fees are available. So I will get that for you, but I will also break it out into not only how much is it made, but how much is still outstanding with residents and non-Hartford residents, because I think that's important.
Okay, that'll be great. How far is HPA's reach into the neighborhoods outside of the downtown area?
Full city.
Full city,
We
okay.
have a total of 6 zones that we operate in. 4 zones are downtown. We're currently revamping all of the zones, but there's 4 zones downtown, and then 2 zones, 1 north, 1 south, where we support sanitation primarily, odd, even, sweeping. After enforcing odd, even, and sanitation, we review safety, people parking in front of fire hydrants, walkways. We heard mentioned development services talking about dealerships and repair shops parking on sidewalks.
Yes.
We also we go and introduce ourselves to those individuals as well. So we're full city.
Okay, and your power is given to you by way of, is that tied into the charter?
It is.
Okay. And you are still continuing to work with Hartford Police Department to help out with those?
Every single day.
All right, okay. Well, thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Councilwoman Rosado and then Councilman Deutsch.
I just have a question, piggyback on Councilman Clark regarding Park Street. So I've also had business owners like the other bakery, Sol de Borinquen, which is 711 Park Street. And he's been, for a while, I know that he's contacted State Rep Minnie Gonzalez. So there's been a conversation there. I'm not aware what conversation or where the conversation has gone, but I've driven around City of Hartford, and I've seen like, I don't know if they're like these temporary no parking signs or parking sign, or it says parking for this business, half-hour minimum. What would you think the ETA would be between your conversations with Julio Mendoza, with State Rep Concepcion? Is there something temporary that we could do for these business owners until that takes place?
First of all, we do not put up any signs that have the business associated name with it. What we do is just put up a general sign that says 15 minutes or 20 minutes or half an hour.
Okay.
I can tell you that that is on my to-do list. I met with those gentlemen last week. I have a meeting with Julio Concepcion Friday, and I'm going to meet with Thea with the mayor's office as quickly as I can. That also includes the bid. We have to have a conversation because I am eager to do the pilot on Park Street. So I'm moving as quickly as I can with other priorities that we have. But in the interim, I can take a peek and see what signs are up. We do not put up most of it. If it's not a pay for park, Hartford Parking Authority is not responsible for that sign, and it's really DPW. But what I could do is I can actually take a peek at those 2 locations since they were brought up today, and then I could work with DPW to make sure that we get the signs up promptly.
Okay, so that would be a basis temporary sooner rather than later to have that put up, that they're located right across the street from El Mercado. Okay.
I'll take, and I have to make sure that I understand exactly what else is around that street. I'll bring my team with me so that we could see what's missing or what needs to be adjusted, and then I'll have to meet with DPW to make sure that they concur, and then we'll get that sign made and up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Sol de Yeah, I mean, because these are people. Thank you. Thank you.
And it seems that those are in the same couple of blocks, 7-Eleven and 8.
Councilman Deutsch.
Hi, this may be a short and simple question. It hasn't affected me yet, but some people have mentioned, you may have answered, if they're in, let's say, the courthouse, they're appealing something in Lafayette Street or some other districts where they might run out of time for no fault of his or her own. Do we have extended, for meters that run out, in other words, and they're held up inside a building for some reason, do we have either...
Grace period?
What's that?
Grace period?
Yeah, something like that, right.
There is a 5-minute grace period on the time elapsing and the vehicle being available to be cited. So there is a 5-minute window there. Now, as you know, 5 minutes is not enough if you're inside a courthouse. You know, we have individuals that work for us that go in at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock in the morning, and they're not called up until 2 in the afternoon.
That's what I meant.
What we've done in that area is we've put up heavily the app signs, because what we've done at least is I've increased the 5-minute or buzz on an app telling you that your time is expiring to 10 minutes. And we're really trying to push, because then if you have a smartphone, you can charge that meter from anywhere, any place.
Well, but I mean, here, I mean, not to pursue it. Supposing you have someone who really doesn't have all those facilities or faculties in mind, you know, they're kind of charged with something, or they're in a situation.
It's difficult. It's difficult to do. You know, that those spots, you know, they're metered spaces for 10 hours a day, and you know, it'd be difficult. At what point do you say, well, you know, you're allowing somebody to stay there an extra half an hour, another hour? What time is extra? You know, and I think that's the part that we would probably all struggle with, is that, you know, you have the ability to pay the meter to its full extent if you want to, but right now at the moment it's a 5-minute grace period that they have.
So, but would they have to just go and appeal it on that grounds in person?
If they have a reason why. We have the appeals officers that are in on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and if an individual comes in and talks to me directly, I will then look at their history, and then on their behalf even talk to the appeals officers before they even get there. So there's always there is an appeals process.
Yeah, I know that. So are they lenient in a situation like that, or is that over a person's
In some cases,
control?
they're more lenient than I would want them to be,
Okay.
but I do believe that they're fair.
All right, thanks.
Hello.
Hi.
Thank you for being here tonight. Just a quick question, kind of piggybacking off of Councilman Deutsch's question, as I've had several people come to me and bring up this process of if I have to be at court at 9 a.m., and the parking meter doesn't start until 9 a.m., but I have to be inside at 9 a.m., what do I do? And I'm hearing the app is the solution. So my question alongside of that is, what has your outreach looked like in terms of letting residents know that this app is a thing and is amazing? I've heard you say several times putting up the signs like literally on the parking meter, but if you're in a rush, say if you're like me and you're a person who's always late to things, and downloading an app is it like in the moment isn't just like a thing that will calculate. What are some other outreach methods that you have done to communities, particularly outside of downtown, and even more so focusing on our marginalized populations that maybe aren't having access to people like me or online to figure out that the app is a thing?
Well, not only do we have the app, but you can actually pre-feed the meter prior to 9 a.m. And again, as I'm listening to you ask the question, I feel that we haven't done a good enough job in communicating that information. So I'm taking it as an action that we need to look at the options that we do have, and we need to we need to put it on our webpage and then use the mayor's office and the NRZs to try to get that information out. You're welcome.
Thank you for your presentation tonight. I just have one comment as someone who navigates the city, as we all do. So around the mid-800s, Asylum Avenue, so like say 850 through 950 around there. So between those markers, during the weekday, there are vehicles that are parked there that should not be, and so they're obstructing the flow of traffic. Certainly, it's been called into 311. It's been called into the police department, but certainly if you could, through the Hartford Parking Authority, take a look at that specific area, that specific zone. There are vehicles that are parked there when it should be it turns into a two-lane traffic, and then
on Asylum Avenue?
Yes. That's right.
So you're talking about down where the old Hot Tomatoes used to be? Union?
No. West Middle School. That's right.
Okay, we'll take a look to see if there's an easement sign there. There should be, if it's an artery to get people out of the city. Usually there's an easement sign that starts at 3:30 and goes until 6. I'll take a look.
Yeah,
And
I don't doubt that there are signs.
And then I'll
There-
make sure that Republic, who operates on our behalf, has that zone highlighted at that time,
Yeah.
so that
Thank you.
they could drive by and enforce.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
So I just have one question. What is the total balance in your R&R budget? So I know like what we're putting aside for this year, but what's the total balance in that account?
That would just be in our cash account.
Mhm.
I'm gonna say it's 1.6 million is what we have in cash.
But that depletes at the end of the year, right? We're thinking it's, right now we give monies to the city on a quarterly basis, and we keep a cash account of
It's closer to 9. Closer to million. We have about $1 million.
$1 million, and by statute, at the end of the year, we go down to 0. We also, not in that line item that we showed, we also put $270,000 or $287 towards R&R, replacement and repair, that we utilize to maintain the garages and the lots.
Got it. Thank you. So I think we are concluded for the evening. I think that concludes our questions. We look forward to continue to work with you through this process to adopt the budget by the end of the month. So thank you for being here tonight. Next, for tomorrow, we will be here again, and tomorrow will be community and business collaboration. So we will be hearing from Health and Human Services, the Hartford Public Library, the Board of Education, and the Office of Family, Children, Youth, and Recreation. So thank you all for being here. Thank you to members of the public, and for all of you viewing and at home for joining us tonight. We will see you again tomorrow. Thank you.